The autumn wind carried whispers of forgotten centuries as Catherine Hayes stood at the gates of Ravenhold Castle, her silver hair lifted by the same breeze that rustled through ancient oaks. Nestled in the remote mountains of Eastern Europe, the massive stone fortress rose from the mist like a titan from a forgotten age. Gothic spires pierced the twilight sky, and weathered gargoyles perched along crumbling parapets, their sightless eyes watching as they had for 5 centuries. At 50, Catherine possessed the quiet confidence of a woman who had faced life's greatest sorrows and emerged with dignity intact. 5 years had passed since Richard's death. 5 years since the history professor had buried her husband and colleague of 25 years. Now she stood before this imposing structure with a leather-bound journal clutched to her chest, her purpose both professional and personal. The European Historical Society had offered her this research opportunity at precisely the moment she needed escape from the emptiness of their Boston home. Victoria Morgan positioned her camera to capture the castle's imposing silhouette against the darkening sky. The accomplished photographer, with her practical short-cropped gray hair and weathered face, had been Catherine's anchor since college days. When Catherine had called about this 6-month research appointment, Victoria had rearranged her exhibition schedule without hesitation. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Catherine's voice carried reverence as her eyes traced the castle's jagged outline. Ravenhold Castle, rumored seat of the mysterious Nightshade dynasty until their sudden disappearance in 1523. Victoria lowered her camera. "It looks ready to devour unwary historians," she remarked with the dry humor that had sustained their friendship through decades. "Remind me again why we chose to spend winter in this remote corner of the world?" Catherine smiled, the expression softening the dignified lines of her face. "Because Ravenhold represents one of medieval Europe's greatest unsolved mysteries. An entire royal line, powerful enough to control 3 provinces, vanished virtually overnight. No bodies, no records of exile, just gone." The massive iron gate groaned open before Victoria could respond. A weathered man with silver hair emerged from the gathering shadows. His face bore the harsh lines of a life spent in isolation, eyes dark and assessing beneath thick brows. His English carried the heavy accent of the region when he spoke. "Professor Hayes, you are expected." He surveyed the women with undisguised suspicion. "I am Volkov, caretaker of Ravenhold." The castle's interior matched its forbidding exterior, grand halls echoing with their footsteps as Volkov led them through winding corridors. Tattered tapestries depicting hunting scenes and forgotten battles hung on stone walls. Their accommodations proved surprisingly comfortable despite the castle's dilapidated state, a small wing renovated with modern necessities. After settling into her quarters, Catherine stood at the window overlooking the vast forest that surrounded the castle. Moonlight silvered the landscape, and in the distance, mountains rose like dark sentinels. A peculiar sensation washed over her, an inexplicable familiarity that defied rational explanation. She had researched this castle extensively, studied every available document, but this feeling transcended academic knowledge. It felt like recognition. "I've been here before," she whispered to the empty room. Sleep eluded Catherine that night. The castle seemed to breathe around her, ancient stones shifting and settling with sounds that might have been whispers. In her dreams, she walked corridors that didn't exist in the waking world, her feet remembering paths her mind had never known. Morning brought a return to scholarly discipline. Catherine established herself in the castle's library, a vast chamber with towering bookshelves and windows that cast pools of amber light across worn wooden tables. Dust motes danced in the air as she carefully examined manuscripts preserved through centuries. Volkov appeared at midday, setting a tray of tea and bread beside her without ceremony. His perpetual frown deepened as he observed her work. "You disturb what should remain buried," he said, his gaze lingering on the documents spread before her. Catherine looked up, startled by both his sudden presence and cryptic statement. "History deserves to be understood, Mr. Volkov. These documents have survived 5 centuries. They want to be read." "Not all that survives should be awakened," he replied. His eyes drifted to the window where darkness gathered despite the early hour. "There is a storm coming. You would be wise to remain in your quarters tonight." After he departed, Victoria joined her, setting down her camera and examining Catherine's notes with curious eyes. "Found anything worth 6 months of exile yet?" Catherine slid a parchment toward her friend. The Nightshade dynasty appears to have been more than mere nobility. Look at these accounts from neighboring provinces. They describe the rulers as those who walk between worlds and masters of the forest and night. Victoria's skeptical expression prompted Catherine to continue. "I know how it sounds, but there's remarkable consistency in these descriptions across different languages and sources. And look at this family crest." She pointed to an emblem featuring a snarling wolf beneath a crescent moon. The symbolism is unusually primal for medieval European heraldry. A lightning flashed outside, illuminating the library in stark white light. Thunder followed, a deep rumble that seemed to emanate from within the castle walls themselves. The storm had arrived with sudden, unnatural intensity. Days passed in a rhythm of research and discovery. Catherine found herself drawn to increasingly obscure sections of the library, as though guided by an invisible hand. She discovered references to Queen Alara, wife to the last Nightshade king, described as a powerful enchantress who had brought both prosperity and doom to the kingdom. On the 7th night, Catherine woke from another dream of hidden passages. Rather than dismissing it, she lit a candle and followed the path from her dream. The castle seemed different in the wavering candlelight, corridors stretching in impossible directions. Her rational mind insisted she would become lost, yet her feet moved with certainty. A tapestry depicting a wolf hunt drew her attention. Unlike the others in the castle, this one showed the wolves not as prey, but as magnificent creatures running alongside armored riders, almost as equals. Catherine's fingers traced the faded threads, feeling an inexplicable urge to look behind the heavy fabric. The stone wall behind it wasn't solid. Her fingers found a seam, then a recessed handle. With surprising ease, a hidden door swung inward, revealing a narrow staircase winding downward. Dust lay undisturbed on the steps, suggesting no one had passed this way in decades, perhaps centuries. Reason urged caution, but something stronger pulled her forward. The staircase descended in a tight spiral before opening into a chamber unlike any other in the castle. Here, the decay that marked the rest of Ravenhold was absent. The room appeared perfectly preserved, as though sealed away from time itself. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes whose spines bore titles in languages Catherine recognized but couldn't read, despite her scholarly background. A massive desk occupied one corner, its surface covered with maps and diagrams of celestial bodies. But it was the portrait above the fireplace that seized her attention and held it in a grip that stole her breath. The painting depicted a woman in medieval attire, her gown of emerald silk adorned with silver embroidery. She stood beside a massive throne carved with wolves. Her posture conveyed quiet authority, her expression one of knowing serenity. But it was her face that sent a shock of recognition through Catherine's core. It was her own face. The resemblance transcended mere similarity. Every detail matched Catherine's features precisely. The slight asymmetry of her eyes, the distinctive arch of her brow, the small scar at her temple from a childhood fall. Yet this portrait had been painted 5 centuries earlier, according to the date inscribed in the corner. "Elara," Catherine whispered, the name emerging unbidden from her lips. A wooden box rested on a pedestal beneath the portrait. Catherine's hands trembled as she opened it, revealing a silver pendant in the shape of a crescent moon, cradling what appeared to be a moonstone. She lifted it, feeling its unexpected warmth against her palm. The moment the pendant settled against her throat, a jolt of energy surged through her body. Images flooded her mind, torchlit halls filled with courtiers in medieval finery, forests seen through eyes that could pierce the darkest night, and a man whose presence commanded both fear and adoration. The visions passed in seconds, leaving Catherine gasping. One hand braced against the wall for support. She fled the chamber with the pendant still around her neck, unable to remove it despite knowing she should return it. The hidden door sealed behind her, and by morning, Catherine wondered if she had dreamed the entire episode. Only the pendant provided tangible proof of her nighttime exploration. Over breakfast, she noticed Volkov's sharp gaze fix on the silver crescent at her throat, his face drained of color, cup freezing halfway to his lips. "Where did you get that?" His voice emerged as barely more than a whisper. Before Catherine could fabricate an explanation, Victoria entered the dining hall, camera in hand. "The light's perfect for the East Wing this morning. Are you joining me, Kat?" Volkov's attention remained fixed on the pendant as Catherine rose, grateful for the interruption. His expression contained something beyond shock or anger, something that might have been fear. The pendant became Catherine's constant companion. Though she told herself she would return it to the hidden chamber, some instinct prevented her from doing so. She began experiencing brief, disorienting moments throughout her days. A corridor would suddenly appear unfamiliar, then transform into some place she recognized but had never seen. Voices would whisper at the edge of her hearing, speaking words she almost understood. Her research took on new urgency as she sought references to Queen Alara. The woman's history emerged in fragments. Arrived at court as an advisor skilled in natural philosophy, married the king after his unexpected rise to power, disappeared during the final night of the dynasty's rule. Some accounts painted her as beloved, others as feared. All agreed on her intelligence and influence over the kingdom's mysterious ruler. 2 weeks after her discovery of the hidden chamber, Catherine woke to Victoria shaking her shoulder, face pale in the pre-dawn light. "Something's happened. They found Volkov in the courtyard." The caretaker's body lay sprawled on the cobblestones, limbs twisted at unnatural angles. He was completely naked, his weathered skin almost blue in the early morning light, his neck bent at an impossible angle, clearly broken. Rain had fallen overnight, washing away any evidence that might have explained his condition. The local authorities arrived with surprising speed, 2 uniformed officers who spoke minimal English. They photographed the scene, asked perfunctory questions, and arranged for the body's removal with an efficiency that suggested routine rather than thoroughness. As the officers prepared to depart, the sound of an approaching vehicle drew everyone's attention. A black Range Rover navigated the narrow castle road with practiced ease, coming to a stop beside the police car. The man who emerged carried himself with military precision despite his civilian clothing, his tall frame moving with calculated efficiency. In his mid-50s, he possessed the weathered handsomeness that comes from a life of purpose rather than indulgence. Silver threaded through dark hair cropped short at the sides, and his eyes, a striking gray-green, assessed the scene with analytical detachment. When those eyes settled on Catherine, something flickered in their depths, momentary recognition quickly masked by practiced neutrality. The officers straightened at his approach, their demeanor shifting from professional to deferential. They conversed briefly in the local dialect before the newcomer addressed Catherine and Victoria in perfect English. "Gavin Blackwood," he introduced himself with a slight nod. "My family owns Ravenhold. I understand you discovered poor Volkov this morning." Catherine found herself instinctively distrusting his polished civility. "Your family owns the castle? Volkov never mentioned an owner." "Volkov managed the property in my absence. I've been abroad handling family business." His gaze dropped briefly to the pendant at Catherine's throat, his expression hardening almost imperceptibly. "I wasn't aware he had opened the castle to researchers." "We have permission from the European Historical Society," Victoria interjected. "All the paperwork was processed through proper channels." Gavin's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, an unfortunate miscommunication, nothing more. You're welcome to continue your work." His attention returned to Catherine. "Professor Hayes, I believe? Your reputation precedes you. Your monograph on medieval power structures was quite illuminating." The conversation was interrupted when one of the officers called Gavin aside. Catherine watched as he examined Volkov's body with disturbing thoroughness, paying particular attention to the broken neck. His shoulders relaxed slightly after his inspection, though his expression remained grim. Once the authorities departed with Volkov's body, Gavin insisted on escorting the women back inside. "The castle can be dangerous for those unfamiliar with its eccentricities," he explained. "These old stones keep many secrets." That night, Catherine dreamed of running through moonlit forests, feet barely touching the ground as she moved with impossible speed. Joy and freedom surged through her veins, the wind carrying scents that told stories no human could read. She woke breathless, the pendant burning against her skin like a small sun. Unable to return to sleep, she moved to the window, gazing out at the vast grounds now bathed in moonlight. Movement near the tree line caught her attention. A shape darker than the surrounding shadows stepped into a clearing, moonlight gleaming on black fur. A wolf, massive beyond anything nature should allow, its eyes reflecting the moonlight with unnatural brightness. It stared directly at the castle at her window specifically, as though it knew she watched. Catherine stepped back instinctively, heart racing. When she gathered courage to look again, the creature had vanished. Convincing herself it had been a trick of moonlight and imagination, Catherine attempted to return to bed. A soft clicking sound stopped her, a sound like claws on stone, coming from somewhere within the castle walls. Instead of fear, curiosity drove her to open her door and peer into the darkened corridor. At the far end, a massive shadow moved with deliberate purpose, disappearing around a corner. Catherine followed, her actions defying rational thought. The shadowy figure led her through rarely used corridors, deeper into the castle's original structure. Stone gave way to older stone, modern renovations falling away to reveal Ravenhold's medieval heart. Finally, in a section of the castle she had never explored, the shadow stopped before an ancient wooden door bound with iron. Moonlight from a high window illuminated the wolf as it turned to face her. Larger than any natural wolf, its shoulders reaching her waist, it regarded her with intelligent eyes that contained too much awareness to belong to a mere animal. Those eyes held her frozen, not with fear, but with a sensation of profound recognition. The wolf nudged the door with its massive head. The ancient wood swung open without resistance, revealing a chamber beyond. After a moment's hesitation that felt like standing at the precipice of irrevocable change, Catherine stepped inside. Unlike the hidden library she'd discovered earlier, this room belonged to the living. A fire burned in a massive stone hearth, casting warm light over furnishings that somehow managed to be both ancient and well-maintained. Tapestries depicting forest scenes covered the walls, their colors vibrant despite their obvious age. A four-poster bed draped in dark fabrics occupied one corner, while books and maps scattered across tables suggested regular use. The wolf had vanished. In its place stood a man, his back to her as he gazed into the fire. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore clothing that might have been modern or medieval, the simple lines defying easy categorization. When he turned to face her, Catherine felt recognition pulse through her with the force of a physical blow. He appeared to be in his mid-40s, though something in his bearing suggested far greater age. His features held aristocratic refinement, tempered by an underlying wildness, like nobility carved from primal stone. Raven black hair fell just past his shoulders, framing a face that might have been sculpted by a master seeking to capture the perfect balance between beauty and strength. But it was his eyes that held her immobile, dark blue, with an inner luminescence that no human eyes should possess. "You've returned to me," he said, his voice deep and resonant, carrying an accent she couldn't place. "After 5 centuries, Ilara, you've finally returned." Catherine's academic mind scrambled for rational explanation. "My name is Catherine Hayes. I'm researching the Nightshade dynasty for the European Historical Society." A smile touched his lips, sad yet knowing. "Your current name matters little. The soul remembers what the mind forgets." He gestured to the pendant at her throat. "That belonged to my queen. It would allow no one else to wear it." "This is absurd," Catherine said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Who are you?" "You know who I am." He stepped closer, moving with liquid grace that reminded her of the wolf. "You've always known, from the moment you first saw Ravenhold." The pendant pulsed warmly against her skin, seeming to respond to his proximity. Images flickered through Catherine's mind. this same man in medieval armor, crowned with a circlet of silver, his hands gentle on her face, his teeth, sharper than human teeth should be, grazing her throat. "Alaric," she whispered, the name emerging unbidden. His eyes flared with intensity. "Yes, Lord Alaric Nightshade, once king of these lands." He closed the distance between them, though he maintained a careful space, as if afraid she might flee. "And you were my queen, my mate, my heart." Catherine stepped backward, academic skepticism battling against inexplicable recognition. "That's impossible. I'm a history professor from Boston. I've never been to Eastern Europe before this month." "Not in this lifetime," Alaric agreed. "But souls return, Catherine. They seek completion, especially those bound as ours were bound." The rational portion of Catherine's mind recognized the danger of engaging with such delusion, yet she couldn't deny the resonance his words created within her. "What are you claiming to be, exactly? Some sort of immortal being?" "Not immortal," he corrected. "Merely caught between life and death, neither fully one nor the other. A punishment and a blessing, for it allowed me to wait for you." A sound from the corridor outside broke the strange spell between them. Alaric's head turned sharply toward the door, his posture suddenly alert, predatory. "Blackwood," he growled, the name sounding like a curse on his lips. "You must go, now." "I don't understand any of this," Catherine insisted, even as she moved toward the door in response to the urgency in his voice. "You will. The pendant will help you remember." His expression softened momentarily. "Return tomorrow night, please. There is much to explain and little time." Catherine slipped from the room just as footsteps approached from an adjoining corridor. She pressed herself into an alcove, watching as Gavin Blackwood passed, his hand resting on what appeared to be a weapon concealed beneath his jacket. His expression held grim purpose, and Catherine realized instinctively that he hunted the man she'd just left. She returned to her quarters undetected, mind reeling with implications she couldn't fully process. Sleep evaded her for what remained of the night, her thoughts circling between rational explanations and the impossible recognition she'd felt in Alaric's presence. Morning brought no clarity. Catherine found herself in the castle's main library, rather than the hidden chamber, seeking historical validation for the encounter that logic insisted must have been a dream. Victoria joined her, setting down her camera and examining Catherine's haggard appearance with concern. "You look terrible. Did something happen last night?" Catherine hesitated, unwilling to voice experiences that defied rational explanation. Instead, she pushed a manuscript toward her friend. "I found references to the last Nightshade King. He was called Alaric, apparently beloved by his people before something changed him in the final years of his reign." Victoria studied the ancient text. "Changed him how?" "Accounts vary. Some suggest illness, others a profound grief. The most interesting versions claim he made a bargain with forces beyond nature, becoming something neither man nor beast, neither living nor dead." "Medieval superstition," Victoria dismissed, though her eyes lingered on the text. "Perhaps," Catherine agreed, fingers unconsciously rising to touch the pendant. But those same superstitions shaped history. The Nightshade dynasty ended when neighboring kingdoms united against them, claiming their ruler had become a monster who fed on human blood and commanded wolves like soldiers. "Vampire legends mixed with werewolf myths," Victoria observed, common enough in this region during that period. What's uncommon is how consistently the accounts describe Queen Alara's role. Catherine retrieved another manuscript. She's portrayed as the king's emotional anchor, the only one who could calm his rages. When she vanished during the final siege of Ravenhold, witnesses claimed Alaric's humanity died with her. Then, the library door opened as Gavin Blackwood entered, his appearance impeccable despite the early hour. His gaze immediately settled on the documents spread before them. "Researching local legends, Professor Hayes?" His tone remained conversational, but Catherine detected underlying tension. "History often contains more truth than legend would suggest," she replied, watching his reaction carefully. Gavin studied her with unnerving intensity. "Some truths are dangerous when unearthed. The past should sometimes remain buried. His attention shifted to the pendant at her throat. "That's an unusual piece. May I ask where you acquired it?" "It's a family heirloom," Catherine lied, unsettled by his interest. "Eastern European, I was told. It seemed appropriate to wear it here." "Indeed." His skepticism remained unspoken but evident. "I'd appreciate if you'd both join me for dinner this evening. As owner of Ravenhold, I should properly welcome my guests." After his departure, Victoria leaned closer to Catherine. "I don't trust him. Have you noticed how thoroughly he's been investigating Volkov's death? Those weren't police he was speaking with yesterday, they were private security." "He seems very interested in my research," Catherine agreed. "And this pendant." Victoria's expression grew serious. "What aren't you telling me, Kat? You've been different since we arrived, almost like you're becoming someone else." The observation struck uncomfortably close to Catherine's unspoken concerns. Since discovering the pendant, her dreams had become increasingly vivid, filled with memories that couldn't possibly be hers. She'd caught herself responding to castle servants in the local dialect, though she'd never studied the language. Most disturbing were the moments when she found herself in rooms she hadn't consciously decided to visit, as though her body remembered paths her mind had forgotten. "I'm fine," Catherine assured her friend, the lie tasting bitter, "just immersed in research." That afternoon, Catherine returned to the hidden chamber behind the tapestry, drawn by an inexplicable compulsion. The room remained exactly as she'd left it, untouched by time or intrusion. She approached Queen Alara's portrait with new awareness, studying the woman's features, her own features with scholarly detachment. A leather-bound book rested on the desk, its pages blank when Catherine first opened it. As she watched in astonishment, words began to appear, flowing across the parchment in elegant script. The language was unfamiliar, yet somehow comprehensible, describing rituals of power and protection performed by the queen to safeguard her king. Catherine's fingers trembled as she turned the pages, watching as Alara's journal revealed itself to her. The queen's voice seemed to whisper directly into her mind, describing her arrival at Ravenhold as a young woman gifted in natural philosophy, what modern times would call science, but which that age viewed as something bordering on witchcraft. Alara had come to study the Nightshade ruler's unusual connection to wolves, believing it a form of animal training rather than the supernatural bond others claimed. She had instead discovered truth stranger than superstition. The Nightshade line possessed the ability to shift their forms, taking the shape of massive wolves while retaining human intelligence. This gift passed through bloodlines, explaining the dynasty's careful management of marriages and alliances. Alaric had been different from his predecessors. As crown prince, he had shown unusual control over his transformations and unprecedented ability to communicate with natural wolves. Upon becoming king after his father's death, he had proven himself a capable ruler, expanding Nightshade territory through strategic alliances rather than conquest. The journal detailed Alara's gradual shift from scientific observer to trusted advisor, and finally to queen. Her accounts of their early years together radiated happiness and purpose, a partnership of equals despite the age's typical subjugation of women. Then came darker entries. Neighboring kingdoms grew jealous of Nightshade prosperity. Assassination attempts against Alaric increased, culminating in a nearly successful poisoning that left him hovering near death. Desperate to save him, Alara had sought assistance from Lord Magnus, Alaric's closest friend and advisor, known for his knowledge of forbidden arts. The journal's final entries grew increasingly disturbed, describing Magnus's ritual to save Alaric a ceremony requiring blood sacrifice, an invocation of powers Alara had previously dismissed as superstition. The ritual succeeded, but at terrible cost. Alaric returned from death's threshold changed, possessing unnatural strength and hunger alongside his wolf nature. He had become something unprecedented, a hybrid creature sharing aspects of the wolf shifters and the blood drinkers of legend. The last page contained a single line written in what appeared to be blood rather than ink. "What have we done?" Catherine closed the journal, her academic skepticism battling against the impossible revelations. Part of her insisted these writings were elaborate fabrications. perhaps created to entertain visitors or frighten the superstitious. Yet the pendant at her throat pulsed with warmth that seemed to confirm every word. She left the hidden chamber with the journal, unable to abandon this tangible connection to Alara. Night had fallen during her reading, the castle windows now reflecting interior light rather than admitting daylight. Catherine realized she had missed dinner with Gavin, though the oversight caused relief rather than regret. Returning to her quarters, she found Victoria waiting, concern evident in her expression. "Where have you been? Blackwood was asking about you." "I lost track of time researching," Catherine replied, concealing the journal within the folds of her sweater. Victoria didn't appear convinced. "He was unusually interested in your absence, asked if you often disappeared without explanation." "What did you tell him?" "That you're a dedicated academic who occasionally forgets social obligations when pursuing historical mysteries." Victoria studied Catherine's face. "But I'm starting to wonder if there's more happening here than academic fascination." Catherine considered confiding in her friend, but caution prevailed. Without experiencing the dreams and memories herself, Victoria would have no reason to believe claims of reincarnation or supernatural beings. Instead, she deflected. "I've discovered references to hidden chambers within Ravenhold, secret rooms where the Nightshade rulers supposedly conducted private business away from courtiers' eyes." "Is that where you were today? Hunting for secret rooms?" Victoria's tone balanced between skepticism and curiosity. "Perhaps." Catherine managed a smile she didn't feel. "This castle contains more history than its official records suggest." After Victoria departed, Catherine found herself drawn to the window, gazing out at the moonlit grounds. The forest beyond the castle walls seemed alive with shadows, moving in patterns that defied natural explanation. She found herself longing to walk beneath those trees, to feel earth beneath her feet and wind in her hair, sensations that belonged to Alara's memories rather than her own. The pendant grew warmer against her skin as midnight approached. Catherine remembered Alaric's request to return, reason battling against inexplicable yearning. Academic caution suggested avoiding further contact until she could verify historical facts. Yet some deeper instinct recognized truth in the impossible. Decision made, she slipped from her room and navigated the darkened corridors with unsettling confidence. The castle seemed different at night, older and more alive. Shadows moved strangely in peripheral vision, and sounds carried hints of conversations centuries past. Catherine found the door to Alaric's chamber without hesitation, though she had only visited once before. It opened at her touch, as though expecting her arrival. The room beyond appeared much as it had the previous night, fire burning low in the hearth, creating an atmosphere of intimate warmth. Alaric stood by a table laden with ancient maps, his tall figure silhouetted against the firelight. He turned at her entrance, his expression transforming from concentration to wonder. "You came." The simple statement carried centuries of longing. "I found Alara's journal," Catherine said, removing the book from her sweater. "It appeared blank until I touched it." Alaric approached slowly, his movements deliberately human, as though afraid of frightening her. "The journal was bound to her blood, to your blood. It would reveal itself to no other. It describes how you changed after nearly dying, how Magnus performed some ritual that saved your life but transformed you into—" Catherine hesitated, the word too fantastical to voice. "Into a monster," Alaric completed, his voice hollow. "Something neither fully wolf-shifter nor fully blood-drinker, but a hybrid, cursed with the hungers of both and the weaknesses of neither." The journal ends abruptly. "What happened afterward?" Catherine asked, academic curiosity momentarily overriding personal implications. Alaric's expression darkened with ancient grief. "War happened. The neighboring kingdoms united against us, using my transformation as justification. They claimed I had become an unholy creature who would spread darkness across the land." Bitterness colored his tone. "Their true concern was our prosperity, our growing influence. My nature merely provided convenient pretext." "And Alara?" Catherine asked, her heart pounding with dread anticipation. Pain flashed across Alaric's features. My enemies captured her during a raid. Magnus, whom I trusted above all others, had betrayed us, provided them with castle schematics and methods to neutralize our defenses. His hands clenched into fists. I pursued them, but arrived too late. Ilara, believing me killed in battle, had taken her own life rather than remain their prisoner. The pendant flared hot against Catherine's skin as images flooded her mind, standing on castle battlements, watching armored riders approaching through forest shadows. The coldness that had settled in her chest when the mating bond connecting her to Alaric had suddenly severed, the emptiness that followed, an abyss of loss no mortal heart could survive. "I felt you die," she whispered, Ilara's memories momentarily overwhelming her own. "The bond between us, it broke." Alaric's eyes widened at her words, hope and caution warring in his expression. "You remember?" Catherine pressed her hand to her temple, disoriented by memories that belonged to another woman, another life. "Not everything. Fragments, sensations. Enough to know there's truth in your impossible claims." He approached carefully, stopping just beyond arm's reach. "The mating bond between wolf shifters transcends physical death, Catherine, especially one as strong as ours. When your spirit returned to this world, incarnated in your current form, the bond began to reawaken. It called to me across centuries, guiding you to Ravenhold. If what you say is true, how have you survived 5 centuries? The journal mentioned increased strength and unnatural hunger, but not immortality." Alaric's expression grew somber. "After losing you, I sought vengeance against those responsible. In my grief and rage, I unleashed abilities even I hadn't known I possessed. Our enemies fell, but so did many innocents. My own people, the wolf shifters who had served the Nightshade line loyally for generations, turned against me." He moved to the fire, shadows playing across features too perfect to be fully human. Led by my cousin, they performed a ritual to bind my spirit to my physical form, trapping me in a state between life and death. Not truly alive, yet unable to die, a fitting punishment for my crimes. "Gavin Blackwood," Catherine realized aloud. "He's descended from your cousin?" Alaric nodded. "The Blackwood line has guarded my prison for centuries, ensuring I remain contained within Ravenhold's walls. Each generation passes knowledge to the next, training them to recognize signs of my potential escape." "Signs like Volkov's death," Catherine said, pieces falling into place. "He didn't fall accidentally, did he?" "Volkov was more than a caretaker," Alaric confirmed. "He was a guardian, tasked with preventing outsiders from discovering truths that might aid my release. When he recognized the pendant around your throat, he understood what your presence meant. He attempted to remove you from Ravenhold before our connection could strengthen." "Did you kill him?" Catherine asked directly, needing truth despite dreading the answer. Alaric met her gaze steadily. "No, though I would have had he harmed you. Volkov fell while attempting to seal the passages connecting to this chamber. His death was accidental, though perhaps fate's intervention rather than mere chance." Catherine absorbed this, weighing the implications of believing such extraordinary claims. "Assuming I accept this impossible history, what happens now? What do you want from me?" "Freedom," Alaric answered simply. "The ritual binding me can only be broken by the willing participation of my true mate. With your return, there exists possibility for release from centuries of half-life. And if you were freed, what then?" Catherine challenged. "Would you resume the vengeance that caused your imprisonment, become the monster they feared?" Alaric's expression softened, vulnerability replacing the predatory intensity that occasionally flashed through his controlled demeanor. 5 centuries provide ample time for reflection, Catherine. I've had eternity to contemplate my failures, my crimes. The monster they feared was real, born of grief and rage at losing you. I would not risk such loss again." Something in his voice, a raw honesty that transcended centuries of isolation, resonated within Catherine. The pendant pulsed in harmony with her heartbeat, physical manifestation of connection she could neither explain nor deny. "I need time," she said finally. "This is beyond anything my education or experience has prepared me to accept." Alaric inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Time is something I understand well, but beware Gavin Blackwood. He will recognize the bond forming between us and will do anything to prevent my freedom." As though summoned by his name, a sound from the corridor outside drew their attention. Footsteps approached, accompanied by the metallic click that Catherine now recognized as a weapon being prepared. "Go!" Alaric urged, moving with sudden inhuman speed to open a concealed door behind a tapestry. "This passage will return you to the main corridor. Speak of this to no one, not even your friend." Catherine hesitated momentarily, torn between rational caution and inexplicable trust in this impossible being. Then she slipped through the hidden door, Ilara's instincts guiding her through darkness until she emerged near her quarters, breathless but undetected. Sleep came unexpectedly easily that night, deep and dreamless until dawn approached. Then images flooded her unconscious mind, running through moonlit forests in wolf form beside Alaric, their movements synchronized in perfect harmony, standing before Magnus as he performed the ritual to save her mate, warning unheeded as she sensed darkness entering the chamber. Alaric's transformation, terrible and beautiful as he rose from near death with eyes that burned like sapphire flames, the mating bond between them stronger than before, yet subtly altered by forces neither understood. Catherine woke gasping, the pendant burning against her skin like a brand. Dawn light filtered through her window, casting the room in gentle illumination that belied the turmoil in her mind. Ilara's memories had become more detailed, more complete, no longer fragments but coherent narrative threading through her consciousness. The woman she had been and the woman she now was seemed increasingly inseparable, perspectives merging across centuries. Catherine's academic knowledge provided context for Ilara's experiences, while Ilara's intuitive understanding of supernatural forces explained phenomena Catherine's rational mind had previously dismissed. A soft knock at her door preceded Victoria's entrance. Her friend carried a tray of breakfast, concern evident in her expression. "You were talking in your sleep," Victoria said, setting down the tray. "Something about wolves and blood bonds. Are you feeling all right?" Catherine managed what she hoped was a reassuring smile. "Just dreams influenced by research. Medieval history gets rather dramatic." Victoria settled into a chair, her steady gaze suggesting she wasn't convinced. "Blackwood was asking about you again this morning, specifically about your interest in nightshade artifacts. I'm starting to think his ownership of this castle involves more than property investment." "Did he mention the pendant?" Catherine asked, hand rising instinctively to touch the silver crescent. "Not directly, but his eyes kept drifting to your throat when he spoke of artifacts." Victoria leaned forward, voice dropping. "I did some research of my own last night. The Blackwood family has controlled access to Ravenhold for centuries, despite having no apparent historical connection to the Nightshade dynasty. They've consistently blocked archaeological excavations and denied research permits until your application somehow slipped through." Catherine absorbed this confirmation of Alaric's claims. "Did you find anything about Lord Magnus?" "He was advisor to the last Nightshade king. Mentioned in a few accounts, though records are sparse. Apparently, he vanished shortly after the dynasty's fall." Victoria's expression grew troubled. "There was one odd reference in church documents, a warning about seeking a shadow lord who grants wishes for terrible price. The description named him Magnus, last seen traveling east after Ravenhold's fall. The information sent a chill through Catherine. If Magnus had survived the centuries as Alaric had, what had he been doing all this time? And if he truly possessed the ability to grant wishes at terrible cost, how many lives had been altered by his interventions? "I think we should leave," Victoria said suddenly. "There's something wrong about this place, about Blackwood. Volkov's death wasn't an accident, I'm certain of it." Catherine understood her friend's concern, but felt the impossibility of departure. The pendant at her throat, the memories flowing through her mind, the connection to Alaric all bound her to Ravenhold more securely than physical restraints ever could. "I can't leave yet," she said finally. There's too much unfinished research." Victoria studied her with growing alarm. "This isn't about research anymore, is it? What's happening to you, Kat?" Before Catherine could formulate a response that wouldn't sound like madness, a commotion erupted in the corridor outside. Raised voices and heavy footsteps approached her quarters with alarming speed. The door burst open without warning as Gavin Blackwood entered, flanked by two men whose military bearings suggested professional security rather than local police. "Professor Hayes," Gavin addressed her with cold formality, "I regret to inform you that your research permission has been revoked. You and Ms. Morgan will be escorted from the premises immediately." Victoria rose indignantly. "On whose authority? We have contracts with the Historical Society." "On my authority as Ravenhold's owner and as a matter of public safety." Gavin's attention fixed on Catherine. "You've accessed restricted areas of the castle, removed historical artifacts, and interfered with ongoing security protocols." His gaze dropped pointedly to the pendant. "That item in particular is property of the Blackwood Trust. I must insist on its immediate return." Catherine's hand closed protectively around the silver crescent. "This belonged to Queen Alara Nightshade. The Blackwood family has no legitimate claim to it." Something dangerous flashed in Gavin's eyes, momentarily revealing the hunter beneath his civilized exterior. "You have no idea what you're involving yourself with, Professor. That pendant is far more than a historical curiosity." "I know exactly what it is," Catherine replied, Alara's memories lending steel to her voice. "A symbol of the mating bond between Queen Alara and King Alaric, created through ancient magic to connect their souls across death itself." Shock registered on Gavin's face before his expression hardened. "So he's reached you already. I suspected as much when Volkov died, but I'd hoped—" He gestured to his men. "Secure Ms. Morgan and prepare the vehicles. Professor Hayes and I need to discuss matters privately." Victoria resisted as the men moved to escort her out. "Catherine, don't trust him." After they departed, Gavin closed the door, his demeanor shifting from bureaucratic to predatory. "How much has he told you? How much do you remember?" "Enough to know your family has imprisoned an innocent man for centuries," Catherine replied, backing away as he approached. Gavin laughed harshly. "Innocent? Alaric Nightshade slaughtered hundreds after his transformation, draining their blood and commanding wolves to tear apart any who opposed him. My ancestor saved countless lives by binding him to this place." "He was driven mad by grief," Catherine countered. "He believed Alara had been killed because of his enemy's actions." "And that justified massacre?" Gavin challenged. "The creature you defend is a monster wearing human skin, Professor. The binding ritual was merciful compared to what he deserved." Despite his threatening presence, Catherine found herself drawing on Alara's courage, centuries-old determination flowing through her modern consciousness. 500 years of imprisonment seems sufficient punishment. What gives your family the right to extend his sentence indefinitely? "Duty," Gavin answered simply. "Sworn and maintained through 20 generations of Blackwoods. We are the shield between humanity and a predator they've forgotten how to fear." His expression hardened. "The pendant, Professor. Now." Catherine backed toward the window, hands rising to protect the silver crescent. "No, it belongs to me as it belonged to Alara." Gavin advanced, purpose evident in his movements. "I had hoped you were merely an academic drawn into events beyond your understanding. But I see now you're already lost to his influence." His hand moved toward his jacket, where Catherine suspected he carried a weapon. "The mating bond works both ways, Professor. Through you, he could finally break free of his prison." Before he could reach her, a bone-chilling howl shattered the morning stillness. It came from directly beneath her window, a sound of primal power that vibrated through stone walls. Gavin froze, recognition and alarm flooding his features. "Impossible," he whispered. "He cannot manifest outside his chamber during daylight." A second howl followed, closer now, accompanied by snarls that suggested multiple wolves rather than a single creature. Gavin abandoned his advance on Catherine, moving swiftly to the window and looking down at the courtyard below. What he saw drained color from his face. "Get away from the window," he ordered, drawing a pistol from beneath his jacket. "Now!" Catherine remained where she stood, the pendant pulsing with increasing warmth against her skin. Through it, she sensed Alaric's presence, his determination to protect her, despite the considerable cost to himself. She understood instinctively that manifesting wolves outside his chamber during daylight required enormous energy, weakening him dangerously. "Call them off," Gavin demanded, raising his weapon. "Tell him to retreat, or I'll be forced to use more permanent methods to contain him." "You would kill an unarmed woman?" Catherine challenged. "How would you justify that to authorities?" His expression revealed the calculation of a man accustomed to operating beyond normal constraints. "Tragic accident during forced eviction. Your friend would confirm your increasingly erratic behavior, your obsession with nightshade artifacts." The door burst open before he could act, Victoria rushing in with unexpected determination. "Catherine, we need to go. Now." She assessed the situation quickly, eyes widening at Gavin's drawn weapon. "What the hell?" The distraction provided critical seconds as sounds of chaos erupted throughout the castle. Shouting voices and running footsteps suggested Gavin's security team faced unexpected opposition. The howling outside intensified, joined by human screams that indicated the wolves had found targets. Gavin's radio crackled with urgent reports he couldn't address while maintaining his position. Frustration evident, he lowered his weapon slightly. "This isn't over, Professor. The pendant may have awakened your past life's memories, but you're still Catherine Hayes. Remember that before you free something you don't understand." With that warning, he departed to address the escalating situation elsewhere in the castle. Victoria immediately moved to Catherine's side, gripping her arm with urgent pressure. "We need to leave while they're distracted. I've got the car keys from one of Blackwood's men." But Catherine stood immobile, the pendant burning against her skin as Alara's memories flooded through her consciousness with unprecedented clarity. She understood now what must be done to free Alaric, to complete the circle begun 5 centuries earlier. "I can't leave," she said quietly. "Not yet." Victoria stared at her friend, recognition dawning that something fundamental had changed. "Who are you?" she whispered, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer wasn't simply Catherine Hayes. "I'm still me," Catherine assured her, though the statement felt increasingly complex. "But I'm also someone who lived before, someone who needs to correct a terrible injustice." Outside, wolves howled in harmonized chorus, calling to something primal within Catherine's soul. The pendant glowed visibly now, its light pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Through it, she felt Alaric's presence reaching across the castle's expanse, offering strength, courage, and a promise centuries in the making. "The choice must be yours," his voice whispered in her mind, connection transcending physical proximity. "Always yours." Catherine made her decision with clarity, born of 2 lifetimes' wisdom. The academic who had sought historical truth and the queen who had loved a wolf king joined in single purpose, reaching toward completion of a journey begun 500 years before. "I remember everything now," she said, both to Victoria and to the presence she sensed through the pendant. "And I know what I must do." Victoria stared at Catherine, recognition slowly dawning in her eyes. The woman before her seemed both familiar and foreign, her posture transformed from academic reserve to regal certainty. "What exactly do you remember?" "Everything," Catherine whispered, the pendant at her throat pulsing with ethereal light. "A life as Queen Alara, the rituals that transformed Alaric, the war that destroyed everything we built, my death and his imprisonment." Her voice strengthened with each word, centuries of buried knowledge rising to the surface of her consciousness. "And I remember Lord Magnus, whose betrayal set everything in motion." Outside, the howling subsided as Gavin's shouts echoed across the courtyard. Catherine moved to the window, watching as the security team regrouped, several men nursing wounds from the wolf attack. No bodies of wolves remained, suggesting Alaric had withdrawn his manifestations rather than risk their destruction. "We need to leave," Victoria insisted, tugging Catherine's arm. Blackwood is clearly dangerous, and whatever you think you remember about ancient royalty, he's willing to kill over it." Catherine turned to her friend, gratitude and resolution mingling in her expression. "You should go. Take the car and get to safety. Contact the Historical Society. Tell them what happened." "I'm not leaving without you," Victoria protested, the loyalty of decades evident in her stubborn stance. "I can't leave," Catherine replied gently. "Not yet. What's happening here is beyond historical research now. The truth of Ravenhold has waited 5 centuries to be revealed." Victoria studied her friend's face, searching for signs of coercion or delusion. Finding neither, only calm certainty, she sighed heavily. "At least tell me what we're facing. If Blackwood is willing to draw weapons, I deserve to understand why," Catherine nodded, recognizing the justice in this demand. Quickly, she outlined what she had learned. Alaric's nature as a wolf-shifter turned hybrid creature, her past life as his queen, the binding ritual that had imprisoned him for centuries, and Gavin's role as hereditary guardian. The academic precision of her explanation lent credibility to claims that would otherwise sound like madness. Victoria absorbed this extraordinary information with surprising equanimity. "I always said your obsession with medieval power structures would lead to trouble," she quipped, humor masking deeper concern. "So Blackwood believes you're the reincarnation of this queen and that you'll somehow free the ancient monster he's guarding?" "Alaric is no monster," Catherine corrected, though Alara's memories contained evidence that could contradict this assertion. "At least, he wasn't until grief and dark magic transformed him." "And now?" Victoria pressed. "After 500 years of imprisonment?" Catherine touched the pendant, feeling Alaric's presence through their strengthening bond. "He's suffered, learned, repented. The rage that consumed him has burned out over centuries of isolation." Victoria's skepticism remained evident, but she nodded slowly. "So what's your plan? I assume you have one, whether it's Catherine's academic strategy or Alara's royal command." A faint smile touched Catherine's lips at this assessment. "First, we need to reach Alaric's chamber. The wolves provide a distraction, but Gavin will have increased security throughout the castle." "And after we reach him?" Catherine hesitated, unwilling to voice the full truth even to her oldest friend. The ritual required to free Alaric would put them both at risk, binding their fates more permanently than marriage vows ever could. If successful, it would restore him to full life, but would fundamentally alter Catherine in ways she couldn't fully predict. If it failed, both could be lost to a fate worse than death. "One step at a time," she answered instead. "For now, we need to move carefully. Gavin won't harm you if you appear to be helping him search for me." Victoria immediately understood the implication. "You want us to separate? Absolutely not." "It's our best strategy," Catherine insisted. "You can monitor Gavin's movements while I make my way to Alaric. We'll stay in contact by phone." After further debate, Victoria reluctantly agreed, recognizing the logic if not the safety of this approach. They established a communication protocol and emergency rendezvous point before parting, Victoria heading toward the castle's main entrance, where Gavin's team appeared to be establishing a command center. Catherine moved in the opposite direction, Alara's memories guiding her through servant passages and hidden corridors. The pendant grew warmer against her skin as she approached Alaric's chamber, its glow visible even through her clothing. Twice she narrowly avoided security personnel, pressing into alcoves as they passed. When she finally reached the ancient wooden door, it swung open before she could touch it. The chamber beyond appeared dimmer than before. Fire burned down to embers that cast more shadows than light. Alaric stood near the hearth, his tall figure seeming diminished, shoulders slightly hunched as though bearing invisible weight. "You shouldn't have come," he said without turning, voice rough with exhaustion. "Manifesting the wolves drained what little strength I've gathered." Catherine approached slowly, noting the evidence of his weakened state. His skin, previously pale but vital, now had an almost translucent quality, dark veins visible beneath the surface. When he finally faced her, his eyes had lost their supernatural luminescence, appearing nearly human in the low light. "It was necessary," she replied. "Gavin would have taken the pendant otherwise." Alaric's gaze fell to the silver crescent at her throat. "And with it, any chance of completing our bond." His expression softened. "You remember now, don't you? Not just fragments, but everything." Catherine nodded, memories of 2 lives existing simultaneously in her mind, distinct yet harmonious. "The ritual that transformed you, the war that followed, my capture and—" She hesitated, the memory of her own death still raw despite occurring centuries ago. "Your sacrifice," Alaric completed, grief evident in his voice. "A choice made in despair when our bond was severed." "I felt you die," Catherine said softly, "or what I believed was your death. Magnus had convinced our enemies to use a potion that temporarily severed our mating bond, making me believe you had fallen in battle." Alaric's hands clenched at the mention of Magnus, ancient betrayal still burning after 5 centuries. "He orchestrated everything: the assassination attempt that nearly killed me, the ritual that transformed me, the war that destroyed our kingdom. I never understood why." "Power," Catherine answered simply. "The journal reveals his gradual corruption. The forbidden arts he studied required sacrifice, each spell strengthening him while extracting terrible cost from those around him." She stepped closer, close enough to see the minute details of his face, the lines of suffering etched by centuries rather than mere decades. "But there's something more, something the journal doesn't explain." Alaric turned away, moving to a table where ancient maps lay scattered among more modern documents. "Magnus was more than my advisor. Before my transformation, before the crown passed to me, he was my closest friend, almost a brother." Catherine sensed the significance of this admission. The betrayal was personal. "He loved Alara," Alaric stated flatly. "Before she became my queen, Magnus had hoped to win her hand. When she chose me, he accepted it with apparent grace. I never suspected his resentment until it was too late." This revelation aligned with fragmentary memories Catherine hadn't fully processed, memories of Magnus watching her with longing when he thought himself unobserved, of conversations that carried double meanings, of his increasing coldness after her marriage to Alaric. "The ritual he performed," Catherine said slowly, connections forming in her mind. "It didn't just save your life and transform you into a hybrid creature." Alaric nodded grimly. "It bound my nature, twisting the wolf shifter's control and replacing it with bloodlust and rage. I became what he wanted me to become, a monster our people would ultimately reject." Catherine closed the distance between them, years of academic training allowing her to analyze these revelations with clinical detachment, despite their personal significance. "And Gavin's ancestor, the cousin who led the rebellion against you, did he know the truth?" Nathaniel knew only what he witnessed. His king transformed into something unnatural, slaughtering enemies and innocents alike in grief-stricken rage after his queen's death. Alaric's voice carried the weight of centuries of regret. "He did what was necessary to protect our people. The binding ritual was an act of mercy compared to what others demanded. And now his descendant guards your prison without understanding the full truth," Catherine mused. Alaric turned to face her fully, the firelight casting his features in stark relief. "Gavin Blackwood is dangerous precisely because he believes himself righteous. 5 centuries of family tradition have convinced him that maintaining my imprisonment is sacred duty. A duty I intend to end," Catherine stated with quiet determination. Alaric studied her with an intensity that seemed to peer into her soul. "Do you understand what that would require? The binding ritual can only be broken through completion of the mating bond, a process that would permanently link your life force to mine." "I understand," Catherine answered, centuries of Alara's wisdom tempering her response. "The bond exists already, incomplete but strengthening. That's why I've been growing weaker physically while my memories of Alara become stronger." Alaric's expression shifted to concern. "The incomplete bond drains you, trying to reconcile 2 souls across centuries. If we don't complete it soon—" "I'll die," Catherine concluded calmly, "my life force consumed by the effort of sustaining our connection." "Yes," a single syllable laden with centuries of longing and fear. "But completion carries its own risks. You would remain human, but changed, marked by the bond in ways that would separate you from ordinary mortality. Catherine smiled faintly. At 50, with most of my life already lived, that hardly seems a significant concern. Your age is meaningless, Alaric responded, a hint of his royal authority coloring his tone. The soul that animates you remains as vital as when you were Elara. The bond would reflect that reality, not the temporary vessel of your current incarnation. Before Catherine could respond, her phone vibrated with Victoria's agreed signal. She glanced at the screen, reading the cryptic message that indicated Gavin was mobilizing his team for a systematic search of the castle's east wing, where Alaric's chamber was located. "We're running out of time," she said, showing Alaric the message. "Gavin's men will reach this section soon." Alaric moved with sudden purpose to a heavy trunk positioned against the far wall. From it, he withdrew an ornate dagger, its blade gleaming with unnatural brightness in the low light, handle inlaid with silver wolves and moonstones similar to the pendant. "This was forged for the original mating ritual," he explained, offering it to Catherine. "It will be needed to complete the bond." Catherine accepted the weapon, its weight both physical and symbolic in her hands. The ritual requires blood exchange. Not a question, but a statement of remembered fact. Yes, freely given, with full awareness of consequences. Alaric paused, vulnerability showing through his carefully maintained control. "But there's something more you should know before deciding." Catherine sensed the gravity of what would follow. "Tell me." "Magnus lives." The words fell between them like stones in still water. The magic that granted him power also granted unnatural longevity. He has survived the centuries as I have, though unfettered by physical imprisonment. This revelation sent a chill through Catherine, despite the chamber's warmth. "How do you know?" "I sense him," Alaric replied. "Our fates were bound together through the original ritual. As he grew in power over the centuries, I occasionally glimpsed his activities through that unwanted connection. He has moved through history like a shadow, granting wishes that always exact terrible price." Understanding dawned in Catherine's eyes. Victoria found church records warning about a shadow lord who grants wishes for terrible cost. They named him Magnus. Alaric nodded grimly. "He became what humans would call a demon, though the truth is more complex. Each wish granted increased his power while corrupting him further. If he still lives, why hasn't he returned to ensure your continued imprisonment? Surely he wouldn't risk you being freed." "An excellent question." Alaric's expression darkened. "I believe he wants me freed, but under circumstances he can control. Your arrival at Ravenhold was no coincidence, Catherine. Somehow, Magnus engineered events to bring Alara's reincarnation here at precisely this moment." The implications of this statement settled over Catherine like a physical weight. If true, it suggested layers of manipulation, extending beyond Gavin's straightforward guardianship. Before she could fully process this disturbing possibility, voices echoed from the corridor outside, accompanied by the sound of systematic movement from room to room. "Gavin's men," Catherine whispered, instinctively moving away from the door. Alaric reacted with swift efficiency, pressing a section of wall that swung inward to reveal a hidden passage. "This leads to the underground chambers. We can reach the ritual space from there." Catherine hesitated, divided loyalties tugging at her conscience. "Victoria, she'll be worried when she can't reach me." "She's safer not knowing our location," Alaric countered. "Gavin won't harm her if she has no information to offer." Recognizing the truth in this assessment, Catherine followed Alaric into the passage, darkness enveloping them as the walls sealed behind them. The pendant provided surprising illumination, its soft glow creating a bubble of light around them as they descended rough-hewn steps into the castle's foundations. Alaric moved with confidence despite his weakened state, one hand trailing along the wall for guidance, the other occasionally reaching back to ensure Catherine followed safely. The passage eventually opened into a larger tunnel with multiple branches, evidence of the extensive network beneath Ravenhold. "The castle sits atop natural caves," Alaric explained, voice echoing slightly in the enclosed space. "My ancestors expanded them over generations, creating escape routes and ritual spaces hidden from outsiders. "The wolf shifter's secrets," Catherine murmured. Ilara's memories supplying context her academic knowledge could not. "Yes. Our true nature required privacy for certain ceremonies, particularly the mating rituals that bound alpha pairs. Alaric led her deeper into the labyrinth, selecting paths with unwavering certainty despite the passage of centuries. Few humans ever witnessed these rites. Your presence as Ilara was unprecedented, a sign of the trust my people placed in you." The reminder of that trust provoked complicated emotions in Catherine. Ilara had ultimately betrayed that trust, conspiring with Magnus to bind Alaric when his transformation made him dangerous. Though done with the best intentions, that betrayal had initiated centuries of suffering for them both. They continued in silence, the ambient temperature dropping as they descended further. Catherine found herself grateful for the pendant's warmth against her skin, its glow strengthening as they approached their destination. Finally, Alaric paused before a massive stone door carved with intricate symbols, reminiscent of those on the dagger. "The heart chamber," he said, reverence evident in his tone. "Sacred space for the most important pack rituals. No human has entered since the binding ceremony 5 centuries ago." The door swung open at his touch, revealing a perfectly circular chamber whose walls gleamed with embedded crystals. In the center stood a raised dais of polished black stone, its surface inscribed with silver runes that seemed to shift subtly in the pendant's light. The ceiling opened to a natural chimney, allowing a single shaft of daylight to penetrate the underground space, striking the dais with precise alignment. "It's exactly as I remember," Catherine whispered, Ilara's memories overlaying her perception. "The night of our original mating ceremony, there was a full moon. Its light came through that opening, illuminating the entire chamber." Alaric nodded, moving into the space with solemn purpose. "Tonight the moon will be full again. The cycle completes itself." Catherine followed him to the dais, noting recesses carved into the stone that would hold ritual implements. "We'll need to wait for nightfall." "Yes, the binding ritual was performed at midnight when my connection to the moon was weakest. Breaking it requires the opposite. We must perform the ritual when the moon reaches its zenith, and my strength would naturally peak." Catherine studied the chamber with academic interest, noting details that suggested generations of use before Alaric's time. "Your ancestors performed mating rituals here for centuries." "Since Ravenhold's foundation," Alaric confirmed. "The wolf shifter line predates human recorded history. We were not created by magic but born of it, part of nature's balance before humans built their first cities." And he gestured to paintings on the chamber walls, depicting wolves running beneath ancient skies. "When humans began to dominate the land, we adapted, learning to live among them while preserving our true nature." This glimpse into prehistoric origins fascinated Catherine's scholarly mind, even as Ilara's memories confirmed its truth. The Nightshade dynasty was unique, though not in ruling through strength. "In ruling through balance," Alaric agreed. "My father taught me that power without compassion creates only enemies, while compassion without power invites exploitation. The wolf understands this naturally." His expression darkened slightly. "When Magnus's ritual transformed me, that balance was lost. The vampire blood he introduced craves domination without restraint." Catherine approached the dais, running her fingers over the ancient symbols. "Yet you maintained enough control to agree to imprisonment rather than continue the war." "Only after you were lost," Alaric admitted, guilt shadowing his features. "In my grief and rage, I became exactly what Magnus had intended, a monster who justified his betrayal. Only when I held your lifeless body did I recognize what I had become." He joined her at the dais, close but not touching, respecting boundaries despite their ancient intimacy. "I surrendered to Nathaniel's binding ritual as penance for my failure to protect you, to protect our people." This naked honesty moved Catherine deeply, academic objectivity briefly overshadowed by emotional response. 5 centuries is excessive penance by any standard. A ghost of a smile touched Alaric's lips. "Time passes differently in half-life. Some decades felt like moments, others like millennia. The first century was the worst, the raw grief, the constant hunger, the rage at Magnus's betrayal. Eventually, those emotions burned themselves out, leaving only purpose, to endure until you returned. Catherine felt the weight of his waiting, the patience beyond human comprehension. And if I hadn't returned? Then my sentence would have been eternal, he answered simply, a fitting punishment for the lives lost through my failure. Before Catherine could respond, the pendant flared with sudden brightness, its warmth intensifying against her skin. Simultaneously, Alaric tensed, head lifting as though listening to sounds beyond human perception. "Something's wrong," he said, voice dropping to a near whisper. "Gavin's men, they've found the passage." Catherine immediately retrieved her phone, checking for messages from Victoria. A single text had arrived minutes earlier. "Blackwood knows about underground chambers, bringing in specialized equipment. Be careful." "How quickly can they reach us?" Catherine asked, slipping the phone back into her pocket. Alaric closed his eyes briefly, ancient senses extending through the labyrinth of tunnels. "They're moving cautiously, using heat detection equipment. We have perhaps 2 hours before they locate this chamber." "And the ritual requires moonlight," Catherine concluded, calculating quickly. "Sunset isn't for another 4 hours, with the moon rising later still." "Yes." Alaric's expression hardened with resolve. "You should leave. Return to the surface. Claim you got lost exploring the castle. Gavin would believe that." Catherine dismissed this suggestion with a decisive gesture. "And abandon 5 centuries of waiting? No." She approached Alaric, professional reserve giving way to the deeper connection they shared. "There must be alternatives." Alaric studied her with an intensity that seemed to peer through flesh to the soul beneath. "There is one possibility, though I hesitate to suggest it." He moved to the chamber's far side, pressing a sequence of stones that caused a section of wall to slide away, revealing a small alcove. From it, he withdrew an ancient wooden box adorned with symbols matching those on the dais. "This contains essence of moonlight, captured during rituals across centuries," he explained, opening the box to reveal a crystal vial filled with silvery liquid. "It would allow us to perform an abbreviated version of the ritual without waiting for the full moon." "Abbreviated," Catherine echoed, sensing the implications. "And therefore more dangerous?" Alaric nodded. "The traditional ritual allows for gradual melding of life forces, each stage monitored and controlled. This alternative would compress that process, creating greater strain on both participants." "Could it kill us?" "It could," he acknowledged. "Or worse, trap us in partial binding, neither fully joined nor fully separate." Catherine weighed this information against the certainty of Gavin's approaching forces. Academic caution battled with Alara's more impulsive courage, while practical assessment of their limited options suggested risks must be taken. "Explain exactly what the ritual entails," she requested, Professor's precision asserting itself. "I need complete understanding before making this decision." Alaric set the box on the dais with ceremonial care. "The mating bond requires 3 elements: blood freely given, spirits willingly joined, and witnesses from both worlds." "Witnesses?" Catherine questioned. "We're alone here." "Not entirely." Alaric gestured to the chamber walls, where crystal formations caught and reflected their images. "These stones have witnessed countless rituals. They carry memories of all who came before, including my ancestors and yours." Catherine nodded, accepting this spiritual explanation alongside her rational understanding of ritual significance. "And the blood exchange? How exactly does that work?" "In wolf-shifter tradition, mates mark each other's throat the most vulnerable point, demonstrating absolute trust." Alaric indicated the precise location with a gentle touch to his own neck. "A single taste is sufficient, coupled with specific words that express the intent to bind." "And because of your hybrid nature?" "The exchange must be mutual, but carefully limited," Alaric explained. "My blood carries transformative properties that would endanger you if taken in quantity. Yours would strengthen me, potentially to dangerous levels if I failed to maintain control. Catherine absorbed this information, analyzing risks with scholarly thoroughness. And the compressed ritual using captured moonlight, what specific dangers does that present? Alaric's expression grew grave. Acceleration leaves less time for adjustment. The shock to your system could be severe, possibly fatal if your current physical form cannot withstand the spiritual transformation. Because I'm 50 rather than 30, as Alara was during the original bond, Catherine surmised. Age is less relevant than spiritual preparation, Alaric corrected. The ritual traditionally includes months of meditation and ceremonial cleansing. Without that preparation, the influx of energy could overwhelm your consciousness, submerging Catherine beneath Alara's resurgent spirit. This possibility gave Catherine pause. While she had integrated Alara's memories and aspects of her personality, she valued her current identity, the academic achievements and life experiences unique to Catherine Hayes. The prospect of that identity being subordinated to her past incarnation represented significant loss. And there's one more complication, Alaric added reluctantly. The ritual requires significant energy from me-energy I lack after centuries of imprisonment and today's exertion manifesting the wolves. Meaning? I would need to feed, he stated plainly. Not just the ritual taste of blood, but substantial nourishment to regain strength. Understanding dawned in Catherine's eyes. You need human blood. Mine. Yes, Alaric admitted, discomfort evident in his posture. More than would be safe for you to provide in your current weakened state. The practical problem this presented temporarily overshadowed spiritual concerns. Catherine considered options with academic detachment, analyzing the problem as she would any research challenge. The castle kitchen, she suggested. Would animal blood provide any sustenance? Some, though far less efficient than human blood. Alaric's expression reflected ancient hunger carefully controlled. It would require greater quantity and time we may not have. Catherine's phone vibrated again, Victoria's message confirming their narrowing window. Team splitting up, using thermal imaging. Where are you? After a moment's hesitation, Catherine replied with deliberate vagueness, Safe for now. Don't worry. Stay with Gavin. Setting the phone aside, she refocused on their immediate dilemma. How much blood would you need? Alaric's gaze remained steady, refusing to flinch from difficult truth. More than you can safely provide alone. An idea formed in Catherine's mind, academic problem-solving applying to supernatural challenges. What about Gavin's men? You said they're approaching through the tunnels, using thermal equipment. Understanding dawned in Alaric's eyes, followed by concern. You're suggesting I feed on them. Not kill, Catherine clarified firmly. But yes, disable and take what you need. They're armed and intend us harm. Their participation wouldn't be entirely unwilling. Alaric studied her with new appreciation, glimpsing the strategic mind that had made Alara an effective queen. It could work, though it represents significant risk. I would need to intercept them without being detected, and feeding after so long without... He hesitated. Control might prove challenging. I trust you, Catherine stated simply. Those 3 words, spoken without reservation, seemed to straighten Alaric's posture, restoring something of the king he had once been. Then I will honor that trust. He retrieved the ritual dagger, securing it alongside the vial of moonlight essence. Remain here. The chamber's crystalline structure should mask your body heat from their equipment. How will you find them without being detected? You said yourself you're weakened. A grim smile touched Alaric's lips. I may be weakened, but this remains my territory. Every stone of Ravenhold remembers its true master. He moved toward the chamber entrance, pausing to look back at Catherine. If I don't return within an hour, try to make your way to the surface. Victoria will help you escape. I'm not leaving without you, Catherine replied, echoing Victoria's earlier stubbornness. One way or another, this ends tonight. 5 centuries of waiting is enough. Alaric nodded once, acknowledgement of her determination, then disappeared into the tunnel beyond. darkness swallowing his tall figure. Alone in the heart chamber, Catherine found herself drawn to the ancient paintings depicting wolf shifter history. Alara's memories provided context. Her academic knowledge could not partial understanding of the symbolic language encoded in seemingly simple images. She recognized ceremonies that had been ancient even during Alaric's reign, glimpsed practices that had developed over countless generations. Time passed with deceptive quickness, the single shaft of daylight tracking across the dais as the sun moved toward the horizon. Catherine checked her phone periodically, noting with growing concern the lack of messages from Victoria. Either her friend had nothing to report, or more worryingly, communications were being monitored or prevented. Nearly an hour had passed when the quality of silence in the tunnels beyond changed subtly. No footsteps or voices penetrated the thick stone, but Catherine sensed movement approaching, too deliberate for natural causes. She positioned herself behind the raised dais, the ritual dagger clutched in her hand more for comfort than practical defense. The massive stone door swung open silently, darkness filling the entrance for a long moment before Alaric stepped into the chamber. Catherine immediately noted the transformation in his appearance. The translucent quality of his skin had been replaced by healthy pallor, the dark veins no longer visible beneath the surface. His movements carried renewed grace and power, shoulders straight, head high. Most notably, his eyes had regained their supernatural luminescence, now glowing like sapphires in the dim light. "You fed," Catherine observed, emerging from her position behind the dais. Alaric nodded, no apology in his bearing, though his expression remained solemn. "Two of Gavin's security team. They'll awaken with headaches and confusion, but otherwise unharmed." "And the others?" "Diverted into the southern tunnels with false heat signatures. It won't hold them long, but should provide the time we need." Alaric approached the dais, removing the crystal vial and ritual dagger from their hidden storage. "We have perhaps 30 minutes before they regroup." Catherine joined him, academic detachment giving way to the reality of what they were about to attempt. "What do I need to do?" Alaric arranged the ritual implements with practiced precision, positioning the crystal vial in the dais's center depression. "The ritual is simple in execution, complex only in meaning. We stand opposite each other, exchange the specified words, then perform the blood sharing. The moonlight essence acts as catalyst and witness." "The words?" Catherine prompted. "In the old tongue of the wolf shifters," Alaric replied. "I will speak first, offering the bond. You will respond, accepting it. The exact pronunciation matters less than the intent behind the words." Catherine nodded, Alara's memories supplying recognition of ceremonial patterns. "I'm ready." Alaric uncorked the crystal vial, releasing a subtle shimmer into the air around them. The liquid within glowed with increasing brightness as the chamber's natural light dimmed, sunset approaching in the world above. He extended his hand across the dais, palm upward in formal invitation. "Place your hand in mine," he instructed softly. The ritual begins with willing touch, establishing the physical connection that will anchor the spiritual bond. Catherine complied, her smaller hand disappearing within his larger one. Warmth spread up her arm from the point of contact, not uncomfortable, but noticeably beyond normal human temperature. The pendant at her throat pulsed in rhythmic harmony with this sensation, its glow intensifying to match the moonlight essence. Alaric began speaking in a language Catherine had never studied, yet understood perfectly, Alara's knowledge translating the ancient wolf-shifter tongue. "I offer my strength to your weakness, my protection to your vulnerability, my eternity to your mortality. Through blood freely given and received, I bind my soul to yours across all lifetimes." The formal words resonated through the crystalline chamber, echoing slightly as though multiple voices repeated them from different points in time. Catherine felt ancient power gathering around them, responding to ritual that had been performed countless times in this sacred space. When Alaric finished, expectant silence fell. Catherine drew a deep breath, allowing Alara's memories to guide her response. I offer my wisdom to your impulse, my compassion to your strength, my humanity to your eternity. Through blood freely given and received, I bind my soul to yours across all lifetimes." The moment she completed the traditional response, the moonlight essence in the vial began to spiral upward, forming a column of silvery light that enveloped them both. Alaric raised the ritual dagger, its blade catching and multiplying the ethereal illumination. "With this blade, forged in moonlight and quenched in the blood of my ancestors, I mark you as mine for eternity." He drew the edge across his palm, blood welling dark and rich against his skin. "Taste of me, and be bound to my strength." Catherine accepted his outstretched hand, bringing it to her lips without hesitation. The moment his blood touched her tongue, electricity surged through her nervous system, carrying images and sensations beyond human experience, running through midnight forests, communing with wolf packs, perceiving scents and sounds no ordinary human could detect. More intimate memories followed, centuries of waiting, grief carefully preserved like precious artifact, hope maintained through darkest isolation. When she lifted her gaze to Alaric's face, Catherine knew her eyes must reflect the pendant's glow, changed already by this partial exchange. With steady hands, she took the dagger from him and drew it across her own palm, mimicking his earlier action. "With this blade, witness to countless bonds before ours, I mark you as mine for eternity." She extended her bleeding hand toward him. "Taste of me, and be bound to my compassion." Alaric's control remained evident as he took her hand with ceremonial care, his eyes never leaving hers as his lips pressed against the wound. The moment their blood mingled, the pendant at Catherine's throat flared with blinding brightness, its warmth becoming nearly unbearable against her skin. The moonlight essence swirled more rapidly around them, creating a cocoon of silver energy that isolated them from the physical world. Within this ethereal space, Catherine felt her consciousness expanding beyond physical limitations, touching Alaric's mind directly for the first time. His thoughts flowed into hers as hers flowed into his, centuries of experiences exchanged in moments of perfect communion. Through this exchange, she witnessed his transformation from wolf shifter to hybrid creature, felt the gradual loss of control as vampire hunger overwhelmed wolf discipline. She experienced his grief at her death, his rage against those responsible, the terrible acts committed in vengeance that had confirmed his enemies' worst accusations. Most poignantly, she shared his eventual recognition of what he had become and his willing submission to imprisonment as penance. In exchange, Alaric experienced Catherine's life as she had lived it: academic achievements, professional recognition, marriage to Richard, grief at his passing. He felt her scholarly curiosity, her intellectual passion for historical truth, her fundamental integrity that had carried elements of Alara's essence even without conscious memory. As the ritual approached completion, Catherine sensed a critical juncture approaching, the moment when their separate identities would either merge harmoniously or clash in potentially destructive discord. The compressed nature of this accelerated ritual left little room for gradual adjustment, forcing immediate resolution of conflicting aspects. Alaric recognized the danger simultaneously, his consciousness reaching for hers with protective instinct. Through their newly established connection, Catherine heard his unspoken concern. Catherine must survive, not just Alara. This recognition of her current identity's value anchored Catherine through the disorienting merger, allowing her to maintain core selfhood while integrating Alara's strengths and memories more fully than before. The academic and the queen achieved balance rather than dominance of one over the other, creating synthesis rather than replacement. As their consciousnesses stabilized in this new arrangement, the silvery cocoon surrounding them gradually dissipated, returning them to physical awareness of the heart chamber. Catherine found herself still standing at the dais, hand clasped in Alaric's across the now empty crystal vial, the moonlight essence fully absorbed into their joined bodies. The first physical sensation she registered was strength flowing back into limbs that had grown increasingly weak over recent days. The fatigue that had plagued her since discovering the pendant vanished, replaced by vibrant energy that belied her 50 years. Her senses had sharpened dramatically, the chamber's dimness now perfectly navigable, the ancient stone yielding scents and sounds previously imperceptible. Most significantly, she felt Alaric's presence in her mind, a constant awareness of his emotions and general well-being, though not his specific thoughts. The mating bond had established itself successfully, creating connection that transcended physical proximity. "It worked," she said softly, voice steadier than expected after such profound transformation. Alaric studied her with careful attention, assessing her condition through both visual observation and their new mental link. "Yes," he confirmed, satisfaction evident in his tone. "The bond is complete and holding stable. How do you feel?" "Different," Catherine answered truthfully. "Stronger physically, more integrated mentally. I'm still myself, but more than before." She tested this new reality, examining her memories and emotional responses. Catherine and Alara together, neither dominating the other. Relief softened Alaric's expression. "That was my greatest concern, that Catherine would be subsumed by Alara's returning consciousness." "Your intervention prevented that," she acknowledged, having felt his protective influence during the critical moment of integration. "You valued who I am now, not just who I was then." 5 centuries provides perspective, Alaric replied with surprising humility. "Alara was my queen and mate, but Catherine is the woman who chose to remember, who risked everything to complete our bond. Both aspects deserve honor." Before Catherine could respond, distant sounds penetrated the chamber's thick walls. Unlike natural cave noises, these carried human origin, raised voices, and metallic clangs of equipment being transported through narrow tunnels. "Gavin's team," Alaric confirmed, enhanced senses providing details Catherine's could not yet interpret. "They've discovered my intervention and regrouped more quickly than expected." Catherine checked her phone, finding multiple missed messages from Victoria, the most recent reading, "Urgent. Blackwood knows where you are. Says ritual must be stopped at all costs. Claims worldwide consequences if completed." "Victoria's been compromised," Catherine said, showing Alaric the message. "Gavin must have convinced her the ritual represents genuine danger." Alaric's expression hardened. "Or someone else has involved themselves." He closed his eyes briefly, extending senses through the bond they now shared. "Magnus, I feel his presence nearby, stronger than before. He's been watching, waiting for this moment." "The ritual's completion threatens him somehow," Catherine surmised. "But why encourage my arrival at Ravenhold if he didn't want the bond restored?" "Because he needs me freed but weakened," Alaric answered, ancient understanding dawning in his eyes. "The binding ritual 5 centuries ago linked our fates. His power grew while mine diminished, yet remained connected. Now that connection works against him." Catherine processed this revelation with scholarly precision despite their increasingly urgent circumstances. "You believe he manipulated events to bring me here, hoping the bond would partially restore but ultimately fail?" "Yes. A failed ritual would have destroyed us both, breaking his connection to me while eliminating potential threats." Alaric moved toward the chamber entrance, enhanced hearing tracking the approaching security team. "Instead, we've succeeded where he expected failure. The completed bond hasn't just freed me, it's restored balance between us." The implications of this assessment were interrupted by a more immediate concern as the sound of Gavin's team grew louder. Alaric secured the ritual implements with efficient movements, returning the empty vial and dagger to their hidden storage. "We need to leave," he said. "The ritual is complete, but my imprisonment isn't fully broken. I remain bound to Ravenhold until sunrise, the traditional completion of the nocturnal cycle." "And Gavin knows this," Catherine concluded. "If he can prevent us from reaching the surface by dawn, the bond would remain incomplete, the ritual partially successful but vulnerable to disruption." Alaric moved to an unremarkable section of chamber wall, pressing a sequence of stones with practiced precision. This passage leads upward, eventually connecting with the east tower. It's longer but less likely to be guarded. As the hidden door swung open, Catherine's phone vibrated with another message from Victoria. "Catherine, please respond. Blackwood says ritual endangers everyone, not just you. Something about ancient pact and balance of power, says Magnus manipulating you both." This message, with its mention of Magnus by name, confirmed Alaric's suspicion of outside influence. Catherine replied briefly, "Ritual complete. We'll explain later. Stay away from Blackwood if possible." She followed Alaric into the narrow passage, noting how her enhanced senses made navigation easier than expected. The complete darkness presented no significant obstacle, her eyes adapting to perceive subtle differences in the stone walls that guided their path. More impressively, her body moved with new coordination and balance, compensating automatically for uneven footing and tight corners. "The bond has altered your physical capabilities," Alaric confirmed, sensing her surprise through their connection. "Not transformation as wolf shifters experience, but enhancement of existing human potential." "I feel younger," Catherine admitted as they ascended roughly carved steps, "stronger than I've been in decades." "The life force we now share reinforces your natural vitality," Alaric explained. "Your injuries will heal faster, illness will touch you less frequently, aging will progress more slowly, though not stop entirely." This information aligned with academic theories Catherine had encountered regarding mating practices among supernatural beings, though experiencing such changes personally transcended theoretical understanding. Her scholarly mind immediately began cataloging differences for future analysis, a response that drew appreciative amusement from Alaric through their bond. "Still the historian even now," he observed, affection coloring the observation. "Some aspects of personality transcend even supernatural transformation," Catherine replied with matching humor. Their progress through the hidden passage continued steadily, the narrow tunnel gradually angling upward toward the castle's upper levels. Occasionally they paused as Alaric's enhanced senses detected movement in parallel corridors, security teams methodically searching the labyrinthine tunnels beneath Ravenhold. "They're being coordinated from above," Alaric noted during one such pause. "Gavin has established a command center in the main hall, directing teams through radio contact." Catherine considered this information strategically. "And Victoria?" Alaric closed his eyes briefly, extending his awareness. "With Gavin, though not entirely willingly, her concern for you overrides her distrust of him." "She's known me for 30 years, Catherine said. "Loyalty runs deep." "A valuable quality when properly placed," Alaric acknowledged. "Her presence complicates Gavin's options. He won't risk harming an innocent academic, regardless of what he believes about me." They resumed their ascent, the passage gradually widening as it approached junctures with other tunnels. At one such intersection, Alaric halted abruptly, arm extending to prevent Catherine from continuing forward. His posture shifted from purposeful movement to predatory alertness, head tilted slightly as he processed information beyond human perception. "Armed guards ahead," he whispered, voice barely audible. "2 men, night vision equipment." Catherine assessed their options with tactical clarity enhanced by the bond. "Can we bypass them?" "Not without significant delay." Alaric studied the junction ahead, calculating possibilities. "I can disable them quickly, but any communication with Gavin's command center would reveal our position." Before they could decide, Catherine's phone vibrated with another message. This one carried an attachment, a thermal imaging scan of the tunnel system, with their current position clearly marked. The text read, "They're tracking your phone. Dump it now. G." The message's signature letter, rather than Victoria's name, indicated Gavin himself had sent this warning. Catherine showed Alaric, confusion evident in her expression. "Why would he help us?" "Not help," Alaric corrected, studying the message. "Verify. He's confirming his team has located us through your phone's signal, establishing legitimate grounds for interception." Catherine immediately powered off the device and wedged it into a crevice in the tunnel wall. "That buys us minutes at most. They already know our general location." Alaric nodded agreement, attention returning to the guards ahead. "We need to move now, while surprise remains possible." Without further discussion, he stepped into the junction, moving with supernatural speed that rendered him nearly invisible to human perception. Catherine followed more cautiously, arriving as Alaric lowered the second unconscious guard to the stone floor with remarkable gentleness, ensuring neither man suffered unnecessary injury. "Their radios?" she asked, noting he had already removed the communication devices from both men. "Disabled," Alaric confirmed, crushing the equipment with casual strength that provided stark reminder of his inhuman nature. "But their absence from scheduled check-in will alert Gavin soon enough." They continued upward with increased urgency, the passage gradually transitioning from rough-hewn tunnel to constructed staircase as it integrated with the castle's architectural structure. Catherine recognized their location from historical research, the East Tower, oldest section of Ravenhold, traditionally housing the royal family's private quarters. "We're nearing the surface," Alaric confirmed. "The tower chamber above connects to the battlements, providing the clearest path to open air." "And the clearest visibility to Gavin's security teams," Catherine observed practically. "Yes, but with advantages they won't expect." Alaric paused, turning to face Catherine directly. "The ritual completion has broken part of my imprisonment. While I remain bound to Ravenhold until dawn, my abilities have been partially restored, including some that Gavin cannot anticipate." The implication registered immediately in Catherine's tactical assessment. "You can shift again?" "Partially," Alaric qualified. "Not full transformation, but enough to confuse thermal imaging and enhance my strength beyond human capacity." As if to demonstrate, he extended one hand, fingers elongating slightly as nails transformed into short claws. The change remained subtle, controlled rather than the complete metamorphosis of wolf-shifter legend, yet represented significant restoration of abilities suppressed for centuries. "And what about me?" Catherine asked, sensing changes within herself beyond the enhanced perception they had already discussed. "The mating bond conveys certain protections," Alaric explained. "Not transformation as such, but resistance to injury and environmental extremes. You could survive falls that would kill an ordinary human, withstand temperatures that would otherwise cause harm." This information, delivered with matter-of-fact precision, expanded Catherine's understanding of their strategic options. "So the battlements present less risk than they appear." "Exactly." Alaric resumed their ascent, moving with renewed purpose. "Gavin expects us to seek hidden exits, avoiding exposure. The direct approach may provide our best opportunity." They emerged from the hidden passage into a circular chamber that had once served as royal bedroom. Though centuries of neglect had reduced it to bare stone and rotting timbers, Ilara's memories recognized the space where she and Alaric had spent countless nights, where private moments of tenderness had balanced the public demands of leadership. These memories flickered through Catherine's consciousness without disrupting her focus on their immediate situation. The integration achieved through the completed bond allowed her to acknowledge emotional resonance while maintaining practical awareness, a balance that would have been impossible days earlier. Alaric moved to the chamber's single window, assessing external conditions with enhanced senses. "Security teams have established perimeter around the tower base," he reported. "Searchlights cover the battlements, with armed personnel positioned at regular intervals." Catherine joined him at the window, her own enhanced vision confirming his assessment. "And Victoria?" "Still with Gavin in the main hall. They appear to be arguing." Alaric's expression reflected concentration as he extended his awareness further. "Something has changed. Gavin seems uncertain." This observation aligned with the unexpected warning message, suggesting complexity beyond simple hunter and prey. If Magnus has indeed involved himself, Gavin may be recognizing manipulation. "Possible," Alaric acknowledged. 5 centuries of family tradition would resist such recognition, but Gavin Blackwood is intelligent enough to question inconsistencies. A sound from below interrupted their analysis, raised voices suggesting disagreement among the security team. Alaric tilted his head, enhanced hearing capturing details beyond Catherine's perception, despite her own improvements. "They've discovered the guards we disabled," he explained. Gavin has ordered the team to withdraw from the tunnels, concentrating forces outside instead. He's funneling us toward the battlements, Catherine concluded, exactly where we intended to go, which suggests either tactical error on his part or deliberate strategy we don't yet understand. Alaric studied the external conditions once more, attention focusing on the eastern sky where the faintest lightning suggested approaching dawn. We have perhaps an hour before sunrise. Once that occurs, my imprisonment ends completely. Catherine processed this information alongside her understanding of ritual significance. And we need to be outside the castle walls for that to happen properly. Yes, sunrise must touch us directly, not filtered through stone. Alaric moved toward the chamber door that would lead to the upper battlements. We should proceed while discord among their ranks provides distraction. The ancient wooden door opened onto a spiral staircase leading upward to Ravenhold's highest point. Catherine followed Alaric's silent ascent, noting how her body responded with unprecedented stamina despite the climb's physical demands. At 50, she should have felt at least mild strain from their extended journey through the tunnels followed by this steep ascent. Instead, she experienced energy that reminded her of decades earlier, before age had begun imposing its inevitable limitations. They emerged onto the battlements beneath star-filled sky, the castle's highest point providing unobstructed view of surrounding landscape. In daylight, this vantage would reveal forests stretching to distant mountains, the full extent of what had once been nightshade territory. In pre-dawn darkness, it presented more immediate tactical considerations open space that left them exposed to observation from multiple angles. Searchlights swept the castle walls at regular intervals, security teams maintaining disciplined patterns that suggested professional training rather than local enforcement. Alaric led Catherine into shadow behind a crumbling merlon, their position temporarily concealed from ground-level observation. "The eastern parapet offers clearest path downward," he whispered, indicating a section of wall where centuries of weathering had created irregular handholds. "With your enhanced capabilities, you can manage the descent safely." Catherine studied the suggested route with practical assessment. "And you?" A brief smile touched Alaric's lips, reminiscent of expressions she remembered from Alara's memories. "My abilities extend somewhat further than mere climbing." Before she could request clarification, movement at the tower entrance below caught their attention. Gavin emerged from the castle, Victoria at his side. Even from this distance, Catherine recognized tension in her friend's posture, though she appeared unrestrained and unharmed. More significantly, Gavin had reduced his security presence to minimal escort, suggesting de-escalation rather than intensified pursuit. "Something has changed," Alaric confirmed, enhanced senses gathering information beyond visual observation. Gavin's heart rate indicates stress, but not the focused aggression of a hunter. He's uncertain, conflicted. This assessment aligned with Catherine's own impression. We should hear what he has to say before attempting escape. Alaric nodded agreement, though wariness remained evident in his posture. The battlements provide defensive advantage if this proves deception. They emerged from concealment deliberately, making no attempt to surprise the group below. Gavin immediately spotted them, raising one hand to halt his security team's instinctive response. Even at this distance, Catherine could see conflict in his expression, determination tempered by doubt. "Professor Hayes," he called, voice carrying clearly in the pre-dawn stillness. "I need to speak with you, alone if possible." "Whatever you have to say can be heard by both of us," Catherine replied, standing firmly beside Alaric. "Our fates are linked now." Gavin's expression tightened momentarily before he nodded acceptance. "Very well. I believe we've all been manipulated by an outside force, specifically by the entity known as Magnus." This direct acknowledgement of what they had already suspected nonetheless represented significant shift in Gavin's position. Catherine glanced at Alaric, sensing his surprise through their bond, though his expression remained impassive. "What led you to this conclusion?" Alaric asked, centuries of royal authority evident in his tone, despite their physically precarious position. "Inconsistencies in family records," Gavin answered, professional training apparent in his concise explanation. "The binding ritual my ancestor performed should have weakened you progressively over centuries, eventually resulting in true death. Instead, you've maintained sufficient strength to manifest wolves even during daylight." Catherine recognized the significance of this observation. "You believe Magnus altered the ritual." "I believe he ensured it would preserve rather than destroy," Gavin confirmed, "creating prison that maintained your existence indefinitely while feeding his own power through the connection between you." This analysis aligned perfectly with conclusions they had reached independently, lending credibility to Gavin's apparent change of perspective. Alaric remained cautious, however, centuries of imprisonment having taught warranted suspicion. "If you've recognized manipulation," he asked, "why continue pursuit? The ritual is complete, the bond established. No harm has been done to innocents." "Because completion creates new dangers," Gavin replied. "Magnus has spent centuries building power through your imprisonment. Your freedom threatens that power, guaranteeing his intervention." As though summoned by these words, the pre-dawn air surrounding the battlements grew suddenly, unnaturally cold. Frost formed on stone surfaces that had been dry moments before, spreading with visible rapidity across the ancient parapets. Security team members backed away instinctively, recognizing threat beyond their training or equipment. In the courtyard below, a figure materialized from swirling mist that had not existed seconds earlier. Tall and elegant despite centuries of existence, he appeared as a man in his 30s, copper hair gleaming even in minimal light, features too perfect to be fully human. His eyes, visible even at distance, glowed with unsettling green luminescence that suggested power beyond natural explanation. "Magnus," Alaric confirmed, voice low with recognition and ancient enmity. The sorcerer smiled, the expression containing no warmth despite its technical perfection. "My old friend," he called, voice carrying effortlessly to the battlements, "and his twice-lost queen. How convenient to find you all in one place after so many centuries apart." Magnus stood in the courtyard below, power radiating from his form like heat from a forge. The ancient sorcerer appeared younger than Catherine had expected, a man in his 30s rather than the wizened figure of legend. His copper hair caught the pre-dawn light with unnatural brilliance, his perfect features unmarred by the passage of 5 centuries. Only his eyes betrayed his inhuman nature, glowing emerald with power accumulated through countless dark bargains. "So, the prodigal queen returns," Magnus called, his voice carrying effortlessly to the battlements. How fitting that Alara's reincarnation would be a historian, forever looking backward instead of forward. Alaric moved slightly in front of Catherine, centuries of protective instinct overriding rational assessment of her newfound resilience. Through their bond, she felt his tension, rage carefully contained beneath strategic calculation. "You engineered this reunion," Alaric stated, certainty rather than accusation in his tone. "Why bring Catherine to Ravenhold if you wish to maintain my imprisonment?" Magnus smiled, the expression technically perfect, yet devoid of warmth. "Balance, old friend. Our fates have been linked since that desperate night when you begged me to save your life." He gestured expansively, frost spreading wherever his shadow fell. "Your imprisonment fed my ascension for 5 centuries. Did you think I would allow that connection to end without replacement?" Gavin stepped forward, professional caution evident in his controlled movements. "You manipulated my family for generations. The binding ritual was a masterpiece of subtle corruption," Magnus interrupted with evident pride. "Your ancestor believed he was creating prison that would gradually extinguish Alaric's existence. Instead, it preserved him indefinitely while channeling his considerable power through our pre-existing connection." On this confirmation of their theory provoked visible reaction from Gavin, centuries of family tradition revealed as elaborate deception. Catherine observed his response with academic detachment despite their precarious situation, noting how quickly he regained professional composure despite profound revelation. "And now?" Catherine asked, Professor's precision cutting through emotional tension. The ritual is complete, our bond established. What purpose does your intervention serve? Magnus turned his attention fully toward her, the weight of his gaze tangibly oppressive despite physical distance. Completion creates opportunity, Professor Hayes. The ritual has not merely restored Alaric's freedom. It has created new reservoir of power, drawn from the mystical convergence of your souls across lifetimes. Understanding dawned in Catherine's mind, academic knowledge combining with Alara's mystical insights. You intend to harvest that power, replace the connection you're losing with something stronger. Precisely. Magnus approached the base of the tower, frost spreading in intricate patterns with each step. The bond between true mates transcends ordinary magical connections. Properly harvested, it would elevate me beyond mere sorcerer to something approaching godhood. Alaric's expression hardened, ancient rage briefly visible beneath royal control, at the cost of our lives. Eventually, Magnus acknowledged without pretense, though more precisely, at the cost of your souls. Your physical forms would persist for some time, empty vessels devoid of essence. The casual brutality of this statement silenced even Gavin's security team, professional detachment giving way to human revulsion. Victoria moved closer to Gavin, her expression reflecting stunned horror at revelations that transcended rational explanation. Catherine processed Magnus's intentions with strategic focus, analyzing options with clarity, enhanced by the completed bond. Sunrise approached, promising Alaric's full restoration once direct light touched them both. Until that moment, they remained vulnerable, powerful but constrained. You've waited 5 centuries for this moment, she observed, deliberately drawing Magnus's attention to herself rather than Alaric. Why not act sooner? Other incarnations must have existed between Alara and myself. Magnus ascended the first steps leading to the tower, power swirling around him in visible distortion of natural light. The convergence of conditions is exceedingly rare, Professor. Alara's soul required sufficient evolution to maintain identity through reincarnation. The binding ritual needed precise astrological alignment to permit reversal. His smile returned, coldly triumphant. And most importantly, I required centuries to perfect the extraction process. As he spoke, Catherine felt subtle change through the bond, Alaric gathering strength, preparing for confrontation while appearing outwardly static. Their mental connection conveyed tactical assessment. Magnus would expect resistance from Alaric, but might underestimate Catherine's role, particularly given her apparent humanity. You always over-explained your brilliance, Magnus, Alaric observed, deliberately provocative. Some aspects of character transcend even centuries, it seems. The taunt achieved its purpose, focusing Magnus's attention away from Catherine. And you always relied on physical strength rather than intellectual strategy, he countered, ascending another step. A limitation I exploited then as now. Catherine used this exchange to assess their surroundings more carefully. The eastern horizon showed perceptible lightning, true dawn, perhaps 15 minutes distant. Gavin had positioned his security team in defensive formation that suggested protection rather than containment, his allegiance apparently shifted by Magnus's revelations. Through the bond, she communicated wordlessly with Alaric, coordinating strategy without vocal indication. His response carried confidence, tempered with caution. Magnus remained extraordinarily dangerous, his powers augmented by centuries of dark bargains and accumulated knowledge. I wonder, Catherine said, academic tone masking strategic intent, if your calculations account for the specific nature of this incarnation. She stepped forward, drawing Magnus's attention. Alara was young when she became queen, her knowledge of mystical practices rudimentary despite natural talent. I, however, have spent decades studying esoteric traditions from cultures worldwide. This statement contained calculated truth. Catherine's academic research had indeed included anthropological studies of mystical practices, though from scholarly rather than practical perspective. The implied threat, however, achieved its purpose. Magnus paused his ascent, reassessing Catherine with narrowed eyes. Academic knowledge without practical application, he dismissed, though uncertainty colored his tone. Ilara's innate talents required my guidance to achieve significance. Perhaps, Catherine acknowledged, continuing the distraction while Alaric subtly shifted position. Though modern scholarship offers advantages unavailable in medieval contexts, for instance, comparative analysis of binding rituals across disparate traditions reveals consistent vulnerability. Magnus's expression betrayed momentary concern, scholarly arrogance warring with practical caution. What vulnerability would that be, Professor? Catherine smiled, channeling Ilara's regal confidence. The practitioner's connection to the subject. You bound yourself to Alaric through the original transformation ritual. That connection has sustained you for centuries while maintaining his imprisonment. She touched the pendant at her throat, its glow intensifying. But our completed bond has introduced new variable to that equation, one you cannot control despite centuries of preparation. As she spoke, the first ray of pre-dawn light breached the eastern horizon, striking the battlements with golden illumination. The moment this light touched the pendant, it flared with blinding brightness, channeling energy that had been gathering throughout their exchange with Magnus. Alaric moved with supernatural speed, 5 centuries of imprisonment giving way to the full power of the Alpha King. His form blurred as he leapt from the battlements, not toward escape, but directly at Magnus, the element of surprise providing critical advantage against the ancient sorcerer's formidable defenses. They collided with impact that shook the castle foundations, power meeting power in explosive confrontation. Magnus recovered quickly from his surprise, conjuring shield of emerald energy that repelled Alaric's initial attack. The sorcerer's perfect features contorted with rage at this disruption of carefully orchestrated plans. Predictable as always, old friend, Magnus snarled, gathering darkness around himself like cloak. Physical assault against metaphysical power. You've learned nothing in 5 centuries. Alaric circled his opponent with predatory grace, partially transformed now that sunrise had begun. His eyes glowed sapphire blue, fingers elongated into claws that promised lethal potential. "I've learned patience," he replied, voice deepened to near growl. "And the value of allies." At this signal, Gavin ordered his security team to protective positions around Victoria, removing potential collateral targets from the confrontation zone. The Blackwood heir himself remained at the tower base, centuries of family training evident in his stance despite shifted allegiance. Catherine descended the tower steps with deliberate calm, each movement calculated to maintain Magnus's underestimation of her role. The pendant at her throat pulsed in rhythmic harmony with the strengthening dawn, drawing power from the sun's return just as the ritual had intended. Through their bond, she coordinated silently with Alaric, their shared consciousness developing strategy that incorporated strengths from both their natures, his physical power and tactical experience balanced by her intellectual analysis and mystical insight. Magnus launched attack of extraordinary complexity, gestures summoning constructs of dark energy that assaulted Alaric from multiple angles simultaneously. The Wolf King countered with speed and strength enhanced by the completed bond, evading some attacks while meeting others directly, his hybrid nature providing resilience beyond ordinary shifters. "You cannot hope to defeat me directly," Magnus declared, confidence restored as initial surprise faded. "I have absorbed the essence of hundreds of bargains across 5 centuries. Each wish granted added to my power while diminishing my humanity." "Your humanity was questionable from the beginning," Alaric countered, maintaining pressure despite the sorcerer's formidable defenses. "Jealousy and resentment colored your assistance from the start." This accusation struck visible nerve, Magnus's perfect composure momentarily fracturing. "I offered genuine friendship while you took everything I valued." The admission exposed emotional core beneath centuries of calculated manipulation. The crown that should have acknowledged merit rather than bloodline. "The woman who would have chosen me had you not exercised royal privilege." Catherine reached the courtyard as this revelation echoed against ancient stones. pieces falling into place with academic precision. Magnus's betrayal had indeed been personal. Not merely ambition, but perceived injustice nursed across centuries until original grievance became justification for monstrous evolution. "You never understood Ilara's choice," she said, drawing Magnus's attention without approaching directly. "She chose Alaric not for his crown or power, but for the balance they created together. Your brilliance without compassion offered partnership without completion." Magnus turned toward her, rage momentarily overriding strategic caution. "You speak of matters beyond your understanding, reincarnation or not. Ilara was young, impressionable. Her choice reflected manipulation, not wisdom." "I chose with clear eyes and full heart," Catherine replied, Ilara's memories providing emotional truth behind scholarly assessment. "Then as now, Magnus, the soul remembers its true complement across lifetimes." While this exchange diverted Magnus's attention, Alaric circled behind the sorcerer, coordinating movement through their bond. Catherine maintained verbal engagement, drawing upon academic knowledge of magical practices across cultures to suggest countermeasures Magnus would feel compelled to refute, professional arrogance providing predictable response patterns. The eastern sky brightened progressively, sunrise imminent rather than merely approaching. Through the bond, Catherine sensed Alaric's strength increasing with each passing moment, his connection to the rising sun, fundamental aspect of wolf-shifter nature. Magnus, conversely, seemed to diminish slightly as darkness receded, his power partially dependent on absence of light. Recognizing this shift in advantage, Magnus abandoned verbal engagement, focusing entirely on mystical assault. Darkness concentrated around him despite advancing dawn, conjured shadows defying natural light to form weapons of extraordinary lethality. These manifested as whirling blades that attacked Alaric from multiple angles simultaneously, forcing defensive response that limited offensive options. Catherine used this escalation to implement the strategy they had developed through their bond. While Magnus focused entirely on Alaric, she approached the edge of the confrontation zone, the pendant at her throat now blazing with accumulated power drawn from the strengthening dawn. "Your mistake, Magnus," she called, drawing his attention at critical moment, "was forgetting the fundamental nature of the mating bond. It cannot be harvested or redirected. It can only be experienced by those who form it." Before he could respond, she removed the pendant, holding it toward the first direct rays of sunrise cresting the eastern mountains. The silver crescent caught this light, magnifying and redirecting it directly at Magnus with intensity that transcended physical illumination. This was not merely sunlight, but concentrated essence of the bond itself, channeled through artifact designed specifically for such purpose. The mystical light struck Magnus with impact that provoked audible response, not pain, but profound shock as energy he had intended to harvest, instead penetrated defenses built over centuries. In that moment of disruption, Alaric attacked from behind, claws finding purchase where magical barriers had momentarily failed. Magnus staggered, perfection marred for first time as physical damage registered despite supernatural resilience. His expression reflected disbelief rather than fear, centuries of carefully constructed superiority challenged by cooperation he had never anticipated. "Impossible," he gasped, emerald eyes widening as Alaric's claws remained embedded in his shoulder, preventing immediate recovery. "The bond cannot be weaponized against external targets." "Not weaponized," Catherine corrected, academic precision intact despite escalating confrontation. "Expressed. The bond represents balance between disparate natures, wolf and human, strength and wisdom, instinct and intellect. Your power derived from imbalance, Magnus, from separation rather than integration." Understanding dawned in the sorcerer's eyes, calculation replacing shock as he assessed this unexpected development. With sudden, vicious movement, he broke free from Alaric's hold, conjuring barrier of pure force that separated them momentarily. "If I cannot harvest your bond," Magnus declared, centuries of accumulated arrogance reasserting itself, I will sever it permanently." He raised both hands, copper hair lifting in unseen wind as he gathered power for devastating assault. The binding ritual required your willing participation. Its destruction requires merely sufficient force. The attack, when it came, transcended previous displays, darkness congealing into spear-like projections that targeted not Alaric's physical form, but the metaphysical connection between Wolf King and his mate. Catherine felt this assault through the bond as acute pressure threatening to separate their joined consciousness, forcing distinction where integration had been achieved. Alaric responded with physical counterattack, closing distance despite Magnus's defensive barriers. The Wolf King had fully embraced his hybrid nature, combining shifter strength with vampire resilience in fluid movements that defied ordinary limitations. Yet Magnus's focus remained fixed on Catherine, recognizing her as simultaneously the bond's anchor and its vulnerable point. Through their connection, Catherine conveyed urgent strategy. Rather than resist Magnus's attempt to separate them, she deliberately relaxed her mental barriers, allowing the sorcerer's attack to penetrate further than he had anticipated. This apparent vulnerability presented irresistible target, drawing him into closer metaphysical contact than he had intended. The moment Magnus committed fully to this attack, Catherine reversed her approach, not pushing him out, but drawing him deeper. The pendant flared with blinding intensity as she channeled its accumulated power not as weapon, but as conduit, establishing connection where separation had been intended. Through this unexpected link, Magnus experienced directly what he had sought to harvest: the completed bond between true mates, with all its emotional resonance and mystical significance. Centuries of isolation and progressive corruption had left him unprepared for this intensity of connection, his defenses designed to repel attack rather than integration. The effect proved devastating precisely because it was not destructive. Magnus staggered physically as his consciousness was temporarily overwhelmed by emotional experiences long suppressed: genuine connection, selfless devotion, balanced partnership between equals. These concepts had become so foreign to his corrupted nature that their direct experience produced disorientation more effective than any conventional attack. Alaric seized this opportunity with tactical precision. Physical assault synchronized perfectly with Catherine's metaphysical engagement. His claws found purchase not in ordinary flesh, but in the mystical constructs that composed Magnus's semi-corporeal form, disrupting patterns established through centuries of dark evolution. "You sought to harvest what you never understood," Alaric stated, royal authority evident despite physical combat. "The bond exists not as source of power, but as expression of balance." Magnus fought to re-establish his defenses, emerald eyes wide with unaccustomed fear as his carefully constructed superiority faltered. "You cannot destroy me," he insisted, desperation coloring his tone. "Our fates remain connected through the original ritual. My death would trigger yours as well." "We don't seek your destruction," Catherine responded, Professor's clarity cutting through metaphysical chaos, "but rather your rebalancing. You've existed for centuries as fragment Magnus, brilliance without compassion, power without purpose, existence without connection." Understanding dawned in the sorcerer's eyes, calculation giving way to genuine alarm. "You cannot," he began, but the sunrise crested fully above the eastern mountains at that precise moment, bathing the courtyard in golden light that broke through his manufactured shadows with natural inevitability. This light struck the pendant in Catherine's hand, completing the circuit begun minutes earlier. The silver crescent flared with intensity that transcended physical limitations, channeling energy drawn not merely from the sun, but from the completed bond itself, the balanced integration of disparate natures that Magnus had sought to harvest for his own advancement. Through the connection Catherine had established, this energy flowed directly into Magnus, not as destructive force, but as fundamental restructuring. Centuries of corruption began unwinding under this influence, darkness not destroyed, but rather reintegrated with original human essence that had been progressively abandoned through countless dark bargains. Magnus screamed, the sound containing rage and resistance, but also recognition. His perfect form distorted as competing aspects of his nature fought for dominance. The brilliant advisor he had once been battling against the corrupted entity he had become. Alaric maintained physical contact throughout this transformation, centuries of enmity balanced against even older friendship. Through their bond, Catherine sensed complex emotions behind his determined expression. Anger at betrayal, tempered by memory of brotherhood that had preceded it. Desire for justice moderated by recognition of his own role in Magnus's corruption. "You were my closest friend," Alaric said, voice steady despite the supernatural chaos surrounding them. "Before the crown, before Alara, before everything that followed. Remember that connection, Magnus. It offered balance before ambition corrupted it." These words penetrated where mystical force alone might have failed, reaching the human essence that remained buried beneath centuries of accumulated darkness. Magnus's struggles gradually subsided, his form stabilizing into semblance of the man he had been before corruption. Still handsome, but no longer inhumanly perfect. Copper hair threaded with silver that suggested proper passage of time. Eyes still green, but without unnatural luminescence. When he finally spoke, his voice carried none of its former supernatural resonance. "What have you done to me?" The question contained more confusion than accusation. "Restored balance," Catherine answered, academic precision appropriate for this unprecedented metaphysical intervention. "Not destruction, but reintegration. The aspects of yourself sacrificed through dark bargains have been returned, though the knowledge gained remains." Magnus looked down at hands that now appeared ordinarily human rather than supernatural constructs. "I feel limited." Wonder colored this observation rather than resentment. "Centuries of accumulated power, reduced to original capacity." "Not reduced," Alaric corrected, releasing his physical hold now that immediate danger had passed. "Balanced. Your knowledge remains intact, but filtered through humanity rather than corrupted by isolation." The sunrise had fully established itself now, golden light illuminating the courtyard without supernatural enhancement. In this natural illumination, Magnus appeared neither monstrous nor divine, but simply human, a man who had made catastrophic choices, yet retained capacity for recognition and potentially redemption. Gavin approached cautiously, professional training evident in his controlled movements despite the supernatural events he had witnessed. Victoria remained further back, her expression suggesting fundamental recalibration of worldview in progress. "What happens now?" Gavin directed this question to Alaric rather than Magnus, centuries of family tradition giving way to recognition of true authority. Alaric straightened to full height, royal bearing evident despite the conflict's physical demands. "That depends on choices yet to be made." He turned to Magnus, centuries of enmity balanced against recognition of transformed circumstances. "Your restoration offers opportunity for redemption, not absolution. The harm you've caused across centuries cannot be undone through single intervention." Magnus nodded slowly, acceptance rather than resentment in his expression. "I remember everything," he said quietly. "Each bargain, each corruption, each step away from the man I once was. The justifications seemed so reasonable at the time." His gaze shifted to Catherine, recognition dawning. "You were right about Alara's choice. I see that now, though acceptance remains difficult." Catherine approached with caution appropriate to centuries of enmity, though the immediate danger had passed. "Understanding transcends approval, Magnus. The bond between true mates cannot be forced or manufactured, regardless of power or position." Her tone softened slightly. "That doesn't diminish what you might have become without corruption." This acknowledgement of potential, rather than merely condemnation, seemed to reach Magnus more effectively than judgment would have. He straightened slightly, ancient dignity reasserting itself despite profound transformation. "What will you do with me?" he asked, addressing Alaric directly. 5 centuries of enmity cannot simply be dismissed, regardless of restoration." Alaric considered this question with royal deliberation. the weight of judgment evidently familiar despite centuries of imprisonment. Imprisonment would merely repeat past errors. Execution would satisfy justice without serving purpose. His expression remained stern, though not vengeful. Instead, you will remain under supervision while demonstrating genuine commitment to restoration. Whose supervision? Magnus asked, wariness evident though not resistance. Mine, Gavin interjected, professional authority asserting itself. The Blackwood line has maintained vigilance for centuries based on incomplete understanding. With truth now revealed, that purpose can be properly directed. This solution reflected practical compromise between justice and opportunity, punishment and potential redemption. Magnus nodded slowly, neither enthusiastic nor resentful of terms that represented significant improvement over alternatives. "And you?" he asked, addressing Catherine and Alaric together. "What becomes of the Alpha King and his twice-lost queen now that imprisonment has ended?" Catherine exchanged glance with Alaric, their bond conveying complex considerations without verbal expression. After momentary communion, Alaric answered for them both. "We begin again," he said simply. 5 centuries of waiting has ended, but integration into modern world presents challenges neither imprisonment nor academic knowledge fully prepared us to face. Catherine smiled at this assessment, appreciating how it balanced acknowledgement of difficulties against optimism regarding their shared capacity to overcome them. Through their bond, she sensed Alaric's profound relief at freedom balanced against recognition of adjustments required by modern existence. "The world has changed significantly since your reign," Gavin observed with practical focus. "Legal identity, financial resources, technological adaptation, these represent immediate challenges requiring attention." "The Blackwood resources remain substantial," Alaric noted, centuries-old awareness of practical matters reasserting itself. "I assume proper management has maintained their value despite changing circumstances." Gavin nodded confirmation. "My family has administered the Nightshade holdings in trust for generations, maintaining public fiction of ordinary inheritance while preserving their true nature." This exchange reflected immediate concerns requiring attention, yet Catherine found her thoughts extending toward broader considerations. Her academic career remained significant despite extraordinary developments, representing achievements and connections independent of her past incarnation. Victoria's friendship transcended both academic collaboration and supernatural revelations, offering grounding in ordinary human connection that balanced metaphysical transformation. As if summoned by these thoughts, Victoria approached with cautious determination, her expression suggesting composed acceptance despite witnessing events beyond ordinary explanation. "So," she began with admirable steadiness, "it appears your research into medieval power structures has taken an unexpected turn, Catherine." This dry observation, delivered with decades of friendship behind it, provoked surprised laughter from Catherine and even slight smile from Alaric. "You could say that," Catherine acknowledged, gratitude for this moment of normalcy evident in her tone, "though I suspect publishing these findings might prove problematic from academic perspective." Victoria's expression suggested agreement with this assessment. Perhaps revision as historical fiction rather than scholarly monograph? Her gaze shifted between Catherine and Alaric, practical concerns asserting themselves. "More immediately, what happens now? Do we simply return to Boston and introduce your companion as visiting scholar? Explain 5-century gap in his curriculum vitae as clerical error?" This practical question highlighted challenges they had acknowledged abstractly but must now address concretely. Catherine glanced at Alaric, their bond conveying shared amusement at these mundane considerations alongside recognition of their genuine importance. "Transition rather than immediate departure," Alaric suggested, adaptability evident despite centuries of isolation. "Ravenhold itself requires decisions regarding its future. The Nightshade holdings extend beyond this single castle, involving properties and investments across multiple countries." Gavin nodded confirmation of this assessment. "The Blackwood Trust maintains legal control of these assets, though their true ownership can be transferred through established protocols. His expression reflected professional consideration of complex logistics. Creating contemporary identity for you presents challenges but not insurmountable ones. The trust maintains connections with government agencies sufficient to establish necessary documentation. These practical matters occupied their attention as the morning advanced, sunrise giving way to ordinary daylight that illuminated the castle courtyard without supernatural enhancement. Magnus observed these discussions with quiet attention, his expression suggesting reassessment of priorities alongside acceptance of dramatically altered circumstances. Eventually, Catherine found moment to separate slightly from these conversations, drawn to the battlements where their confrontation had begun. The castle below appeared different in morning light, still ancient and imposing, but no longer threatening, its secrets exposed rather than concealed. From this vantage, she could see forests stretching toward distant mountains, the full extent of what had once been Nightshade territory. Alaric joined her without speaking, their bond conveying comfort in shared silence. His physical presence beside her felt simultaneously novel and familiar, current reality balanced against centuries of separation. "Having second thoughts?" he asked finally, no judgment in the question. Catherine considered this seriously, academic honesty requiring thorough assessment rather than merely reassuring response. "Not regret," she clarified, "but recognition of profound transformation. 2 days ago, I was Professor Catherine Hayes, respected historian with conventional life ahead of me. Now I stand beside Wolf King from medieval legend, contemplating existence shaped by supernatural bond." "Contemplating," Alaric noted, "not rejecting." "No," Catherine agreed, smile touching her lips. "Not rejecting. The bond feels right precisely because it doesn't erase who I became independent of Alara. Integration, rather than replacement." Alaric nodded understanding, his own experience reflecting similar balance between past authority and present adaptation. 5 centuries of imprisonment provided extensive opportunity for reflection. The king I was required singular focus appropriate to his time. The man I must become requires broader perspective. This acknowledgement of necessary evolution, rather than mere restoration, impressed Catherine deeply. Through their bond, she sensed genuine commitment to growth rather than merely nostalgic attachment to former glory, quality essential for successful navigation of dramatically altered circumstances. "We balance each other," she observed, academic precision identifying fundamental truth beneath emotional connection. Different strengths applied to shared challenges. "As true mates should," Alaric agreed, ancient term carrying contemporary relevance through their lived experience. The pendant at Catherine's throat had returned to ordinary appearance. Its supernatural glow subsided now that immediate crisis had passed. Yet it remained warm against her skin, physical manifestation of metaphysical connection that transcended ordinary explanation. Through this connection, she sensed Alaric's complex emotions, joy at freedom balanced against awareness of responsibilities it entailed, relief at reunion tempered by recognition of adaptation required. Below in the courtyard, practical discussions continued among Gavin, Victoria, and even Magnus, immediate logistics requiring attention despite extraordinary context. Security team members maintained professional distance while processing witnessed events that transcended conventional understanding. The world continued functioning despite metaphysical revelations, ordinary concerns persisting alongside extraordinary developments. This juxtaposition struck Catherine as particularly appropriate. Supernatural events nested within ordinary reality rather than separate from it. Her academic career had focused on historical power structures precisely because they shaped everyday existence, despite their seemingly abstract nature. The supernatural elements she now experienced directly represented extension of this principle, rather than contradiction. "What would you like to do first?" Alaric asked, the question reflecting ordinary consideration despite extraordinary context. Having reclaimed freedom after 5 centuries. Catherine considered this seriously, weighing possibilities with attention to both practical logistics and emotional significance. Visit Boston, she decided finally. Show you the life I built as Catherine Hayes, introduce you to colleagues and connections established through academic work. She smiled slightly. Then perhaps more extensive exploration. 5 centuries of historical developments provide considerable material for first-hand investigation. The historian's ultimate research opportunity, Alaric observed with matching humor, comparing contemporary accounts against memories of direct experience. Though publishing such comparisons might prove problematic, Catherine acknowledged, academic precision balancing supernatural perspective, peer reviewers tend to require more conventional citations than personal recollection from previous incarnation. This observation provoked genuine laughter from Alaric, the sound containing joy beyond mere amusement, freedom expressed through spontaneous emotion after centuries of constraint. Through their bond, Catherine felt this joy as tangibly as physical sensation, their shared consciousness multiplying individual experience. Victoria approached, her expression suggesting conclusions reached through practical assessment rather than supernatural insight. "I've booked flights back to Boston for next week," she announced without preamble, "assuming that's sufficient time to arrange necessary documentation for your companion." Her gaze shifted briefly to Alaric, curiosity balanced against friendship's protective instinct. "Alaric," Catherine corrected gently. "And yes, that should be adequate according to Gavin's assessment of available resources." Victoria nodded acceptance of both correction and practical confirmation. Gavin has suggested maintaining connection with the Historical Society through adjusted research focus, documenting Ravenhold's architectural features rather than pursuing the Nightshade dynasty directly. Her expression suggested appreciation for this elegant solution. Provides legitimate reason for continued association without uncomfortable explanations regarding discoveries made. This practical approach to extraordinary circumstances reflected Victoria's fundamental pragmatism, quality that had sustained their friendship through decades of ordinary challenges before supernatural elements emerged. Catherine felt profound gratitude for this continued practicality, its grounding influence balancing metaphysical transformation she had experienced. "And Magnus?" she asked, academic thoroughness requiring comprehensive assessment. "Remains under observation while adjustments continue," Victoria reported. "Gavin has arranged appropriate accommodations within the castle, secure without being punitive." She hesitated momentarily. "He seems genuinely altered by whatever you did during the confrontation. Less arrogant, more reflective." This assessment aligned with Catherine's own observations, though she recognized potential for deception given Magnus's centuries of manipulation. Through their bond, she sensed Alaric's matching caution, not vengeful, but realistically aware of patterns established across lifetimes. "Restoration provides opportunity without guaranteeing redemption," Alaric observed. "His choices moving forward will demonstrate whether balance can be maintained without external constraint." Victoria accepted this assessment with characteristic practicality. Gavin seems adequately prepared for either outcome. His training apparently included contingencies for various supernatural scenarios, though actual confirmation exceeded theoretical preparation. This observation provoked slight smile from Catherine, academic appreciation for gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application. Most field research involves similar adjustments, though admittedly with less dramatic implications. Their conversation continued in this vein. Extraordinary circumstances, discussed with ordinary consideration, supernatural elements balanced against practical logistics. Throughout these exchanges, Catherine maintained awareness of Alaric beside her, their bond providing continuous connection that enhanced rather than replaced verbal communication. Eventually, they descended from the battlements to rejoin discussions in the courtyard, practical matters requiring attention, despite metaphysical revelations. Gavin had established temporary command center in what had once been the castle's Great Hall, modern technology coexisting incongruously with medieval architecture. Security team members maintained professional focus despite witnessing events beyond conventional explanation, their training apparently extending to circumstances ordinary law enforcement would find incomprehensible. Magnus observed these activities from slight distance, his expression suggesting internal recalibration rather than external resistance. The sorcerer's restoration had physically transformed him from supernatural entity to ordinary human appearance, though centuries of accumulated knowledge remained intact behind now normal green eyes. This combination of reduced power with retained awareness presented both opportunity and challenge, potential for genuine redemption, balanced against centuries of established patterns. "He will require sustained supervision," Alaric observed quietly as they approached. "Restoration provides balance, but cannot erase memories or knowledge accumulated across centuries." Catherine nodded agreement with this assessment. Integration rather than elimination. The man he was remains part of the being he became, for better and worse. This observation applied equally to their own circumstances, though with significantly different context. Catherine herself now balanced Professor's precision with Queen's authority, academic knowledge with mystical insight. Alaric combined royal command with adaptability required by dramatically altered circumstances, ancient power with recognition of contemporary complexities. Together they approached Gavin's improvised command center, ready to address immediate logistics while considering longer-term implications. The Blackwood heir acknowledged their arrival with professional courtesy, balanced against newly recognized authority. Centuries of family tradition recalibrated by revealed truth. "I've arranged for necessary documentation," he reported without preamble. Legal identity established through connections maintained for precisely such contingencies, though admittedly without expectation of actual implementation. "Your ancestors prepared thoroughly," Alaric observed, appreciation evident despite centuries of effective imprisonment under Blackwood supervision. "Duty performed without complete understanding," Gavin acknowledged, no defensiveness in this assessment. The binding ritual was maintained through generations based on fragmented knowledge deliberately corrupted by Magnus, and this recognition of manipulation without deflection of responsibility impressed Catherine significantly, suggesting potential for productive collaboration moving forward. Through their bond, she sensed Alaric's matching assessment, respect for professionalism that transcended supernatural revelations. "And Ravenhold itself?" Alaric asked, attention turning to immediate environment with appropriate priority. "Remains under Blackwood Trust Administration pending formal transfer," Gavin explained. "Legal mechanisms exist for returning control to rightful owner once proper documentation establishes identity." His expression suggested appreciation for bureaucratic irony involved in returning property to 5-century-old original owner. "The castle requires significant restoration to meet modern safety standards if public access is to continue." This practical assessment triggered consideration of broader implications. Ravenhold represented physical manifestation of Nightshade Dynasty's historical significance, its deteriorated condition reflecting centuries of suppressed truth regarding its original inhabitants. Restoration would require decisions regarding how much history to reveal versus conceal, which aspects of wolf shifter culture could be acknowledged publicly versus maintained as protected knowledge. A balance between accessibility and protection, Catherine observed, academic awareness of preservation challenges informing supernatural considerations, historical significance without exposing sensitive information. Alaric nodded agreement with this assessment. The Nightshade holdings extend beyond Ravenhold itself, including properties and investments maintained through Blackwood administration. Their future purpose requires similar consideration, contemporary utility balanced against historical significance. These discussions continued throughout the day, practical matters receiving necessary attention despite extraordinary context. Victoria maintained detailed notes with characteristic thoroughness, her academic training applying to supernatural circumstances with remarkable adaptability. Magnus observed from prescribed distance, his occasional contributions reflecting genuine insight without former arrogance, transformation clearly progressing though far from complete. As evening approached, Catherine found moment for private conversation with Alaric, their bond ensuring genuine privacy despite physical proximity to others. They stood on smaller balcony overlooking the forest. sunset painting landscape with golden illumination reminiscent of dawn that had witnessed their confrontation with Magnus. "Are you disappointed?" she asked, the question reflecting genuine consideration rather than insecurity. "The world you've returned to bears little resemblance to the kingdom you ruled." Alaric considered this seriously, his response thoughtful rather than merely reassuring. "The world changes regardless of individual preference. 5 centuries would have transformed my kingdom even without supernatural intervention." His expression reflected balanced perspective that transcended mere nostalgia. The Nightshade dynasty served its purpose in its time. Our challenge now involves finding appropriate purpose for current circumstances. This assessment impressed Catherine deeply, its wisdom reflecting genuine growth rather than mere adaptation. Through their bond, she sensed complex emotions behind this philosophical acceptance: appreciation for freedom, balanced against recognition of responsibilities it entailed, joy at reunion tempered by awareness of adjustments required. "From ruling medieval kingdom to navigating modern bureaucracy," she observed with gentle humor. "Significant adjustment by any standard. Yet with advantages my royal predecessors never imagined," Alaric countered, matching her tone. "Global travel, instantaneous communication, access to knowledge accumulated across centuries." His expression warmed as he regarded her. Most significantly, partnership with women whose academic achievements complement rather than diminish her spiritual connection. This acknowledgement of her professional identity, alongside metaphysical significance, moved Catherine profoundly. Unlike Magnus's ancient resentment of Alara's choice, Alaric valued Catherine's independent development, her scholarly accomplishments representing genuine strength rather than distraction from supernatural significance. As darkness gathered around Ravenhold, preparations continued for transition rather than merely restoration. The castle that had served as prison for 5 centuries would become headquarters for operations balancing historical preservation against contemporary purpose, supernatural knowledge against public education. Magnus would remain under supervision, while demonstrating commitment to maintained balance, his eventual role dependent on choices made moving forward. Gavin would continue family tradition of vigilance with newly accurate understanding, professional training applied to genuine rather than corrupted purpose. Catherine and Alaric would navigate integration of ancient connection with modern circumstances, their bond providing foundation for partnership that transcended ordinary explanation without replacing practical considerations. Academic career would continue alongside supernatural awareness, professional connections maintained while incorporating extraordinary perspective gained through metaphysical transformation. The moon rose over Ravenhold's ancient towers, its light reminiscent of ritual that had originally bound Wolf King to his queen across lifetimes. The same light now illuminated path forward rather than backward, future possibilities rather than merely historical significance. The immortal Alpha had found reckoning not through destruction, but through restoration, balance achieved through integration rather than dominance. As Catherine stood beside Alaric watching moonlight transform the landscape, she felt completion that transcended simple happiness. The bond between them had been forged across centuries, tested through separation and restoration, strengthened through shared purpose rather than merely supernatural connection. Whatever challenges awaited in modern world, they would face them together. Historian and Wolf King, Professor and Alpha, Catherine and Alaric. Their souls had found each other across death itself, completing circle begun 5 centuries earlier and opening possibilities neither could have imagined alone.